Hi everyone, we hope you're doing well. We're hanging in there though honestly, we haven't been getting much sleep lately. Today, we want to answer a question we get a lot: how do we publish our audiobooks? First, we post most audiobooks on Patreon as paid content. They stay paid for a few months. After that, they become free to listen to on Patreon forever. A few weeks later, we post them on other places like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, X. Lately, things have been a bit slow in terms of new members. So we'd love your help. Please share our site with your friends or in places like Facebook groups, Twitter, X, Discord, Reddit, or novel forums. Even one share can really help us grow. Thanks so much for your support, to the extent that Albert Speer, Hitler's closest confidant and Minister of Armaments, said in his memoirs that Germany would never have invaded Poland without the synthetic oil provided to Germany by American companies. There are so many things the German military needs that it is difficult to list them all, but the most important thing is vehicles. Contrary to public perception, Germany suffered from a vehicle shortage from the beginning to the end of the war, as it was widely known as a mechanized force. Germany, Europe's strongest industrial country, had a shortage of cars, so they used horse-drawn carriages? I cannot believe it. I'm sure many friends will say this, but it's true. Due to an absolute lack of vehicles, the German army had to rely on military horses for most of its transportation, and each division even had a unit that specialized in treating military horses. War horses were so important to the German army that there is an anecdote that when asked why Germany did not use poison gas at the post-war Nuremberg trials, Göring said, it was because there were not enough gas masks to cover the horses. Naturally, supply using war horses takes longer than supply using vehicles. The longer the supply is delayed, the more soldiers are bleeding on the front lines. Therefore, we must secure as many vehicles as possible before the war. Not only Ford but also General Motors, GM, has expressed its intention to actively cooperate with us. Up to this point, it's the same as the history I know. However, according to history, even Jewish companies that would have been at odds with Germany proposed cooperation first. This was so unexpected that I was quite embarrassed. It's strange to think of a Jew joining hands with the Nazis. What's even more shocking is that there is a Hitler learning craze among some Jews in the United States. There were also reports that many of the buyers of Mein Kampf displayed in American bookstores were Jewish. Are you saying that my previous speech made a big impression in America? It's unimaginable that Jews are reading Mein Kampf. Anyway, isn't that a good thing? It means that there are more people in the United States who follow the ideology of National Socialism. Of course, it is not a bad thing, but I am still concerned that if His Majesty the President makes a mistake, he will be considered an idol of the Jews. These were the words of Goebbels, who still could not abandon anti-Semitism. Looking at the expression on his face, it seemed like he was genuinely worried about me being treated like a messiah among the Jews. Himmler and Heydrich seem to have similar thoughts. There is no need to worry. The most important thing to me is not how I look in the eyes of others, but whether I can help Germany even a little more. Anyway, isn't the result good? There is no reason to refuse since they will voluntarily cooperate with us, and rearmament is accelerating. Although they were having some fun through trade with China and Japan, the money they earned from trade was not enough to cover the costs of rearmament. However, thanks to companies in the United States, especially Jewish companies, reaching out to us first, the burden was greatly reduced. This is why people should live good lives. They say it all comes back to you one day. Balkan countries such as Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria were also good customers for us in Germany. In particular, Romania had no hesitation in importing German weapons even though it was allied with France and Poland, which were hostile to Germany. Since it borders Hungary on the front, the Soviet Union on the back, and Bulgaria on the bottom, it was concerned about strengthening its national defense capabilities. I had no choice but to write. France and Poland also did not touch it much because they wanted to avoid trouble with their allies over arms imports. At best, they might ask implicitly if you would like to buy some Korean products instead of German ones. Hungary and Bulgaria were more serious about importing German weapons than Romania, and this was understandable because both countries had a history of losing land to Romania due to their defeat in World War I. A strong army is essential to one day regain land lost through war. To build a strong army, you need good weapons, and there happens to be a country not far away that is selling weapons. Their orders were so large that there was a disruption in the production of weapons to be supplied to the National Defense Forces. Even production of the first tank, whose mass production had been halted, was resumed at the request of Hungary and Bulgaria. I really don't understand. What is so good about a light tank with only 2 machine guns that you would buy so many of them? Isn't that so? It seems like there is no news from Spain yet. Anyway, isn't it a good thing that we in Germany can make money? Due to issues with tank development and production, I have had a lot more time to meet with Guderian recently. Knowing Guderian's skills, I promoted him whenever I had the chance, and thanks to that, I now have a captain's epaulet on my shoulder. Guderian is so grateful to me for hiring him that he even gave up his vacation and is working hard day and night to repay my expectations. Switzerland, Sweden, and Iran have also contacted us to buy our tanks, and they also want Panzer II. What do you think, General? I don't think it will be a big problem if I sell it. My thoughts are the same as Your Excellency the President. It might be the fourth tank, which has just been prototyped, but if it's the first and second tank, there's no need to worry. The original plan was to mass-produce only 500 tanks, but 2,000 were produced due to numerous sales requests. The money earned from selling number 1 and number 2 will be converted into other weapons, including number 4, and appear in the world. If this is not a creative economy, what else is it? Chapter 30 Chang's Era 1, April 13, 1937. Mussolini announced the annexation of Ethiopia. The Ethiopian government led by Selassie went into exile abroad, and the Ethiopian military advisors also returned to Germany. On May 12, Chiang Kai-shek declared the completion of the 6th Operation First Attack. The Chinese Communist Party, which had barely saved its life through a grandiose show called the Long March, was officially eradicated. The Communist Army fought fiercely against the National Revolutionary Army, but could not change the outcome. The whereabouts of Mao Zedong, the head of the Communist Party, and his subordinates are not exactly known. It is said that during the battle, the building containing Mao Zedong and the Communist Party leadership was blown away by artillery fire from the National Revolutionary Army, so there was no way to confirm whether they were alive or dead, but Chiang Kai-shek seemed certain that they were dead. It must be so for the sake of humanity. On the same day, the coronation ceremony of George V, who became King of England in place of his older brother who abdicated, was held at Westminster Abbey. I sent a congratulatory telegram to King George VI in the name of the German Führer, and received a reply 10 days later. I sent a congratulatory message and wrote as much as I could to express my gratitude, but there were no complaints. The congratulatory telegram I sent was the same. 10 days later, the Great Purge began in the Soviet Union. Great Purge. Just listening to it brings to mind the image of Stalin scribbling down the names of his victims in his death note with a smoking pipe in his mouth. Due to the Great Purge, the Trotsky followers and communists who opposed Stalin remaining in the Soviet Union were completely exterminated, and Stalin's one-man dictatorship was completed. The Great Purge is known as one of Stalin's representative evil deeds, but as time passed, a new perspective also emerged. A representative argument is that even though many people died due to Stalin's reckless purges, thanks to them, corruption and bureaucracy were eradicated throughout the Soviet Union, and high-ranking military officials who insisted on old-fashioned tactics and strategies were eliminated, resulting in the development of the Soviet military. This is not entirely wrong. Before the Great Purge, the corruption and negligence of party members in the Soviet Union was such that Stalin expressed concern and anger several times, and the state of the military was not much different. The corruption problem in the Soviet Union was so serious that even the police and military police, who were supposed to crack down on it, worked together to commit corruption. However, it is true that the Great Purge was an opportunity for corrupt officials and high-ranking military officials who had committed corruption to fly away, reducing corruption, reorganizing the administrative system, and changing the tactics and strategies of the Soviet military leadership. However, we must not overlook the fact that this is an argument pushed by Stalin's followers in order to rationalize Stalin's evil deeds. Just like the crazy claims made by neo-Nazis that the Holocaust was a necessary evil for Hitler's seizure of power and national unity. It is true that a large number of corrupt officials who committed corruption were purged through the purge. The problem is that many ordinary party members and officials were also executed. If you look closely, you will see that the statement that the Soviet military grew qualitatively by eliminating hard-headed, incompetent assholes who were only busy earning their salaries and holding on to their positions is contradictory. While Gregory Kulik, a star among stars who is credited with delaying the modernization of the Soviet army by 5 years, was on a roll, Mikhail Tukhachevsky, one of the greatest generals in the Soviet army, was executed after being tortured, and Konstantin Rokozov, a great general who later played a major role in the German-Soviet war. How can we explain the fact that Ski became a half-baby after being tortured mercilessly and was sent to the Gulag? Stalin's reckless purges, which went far beyond the limit, did not improve the quality of the Soviet military but instead caused a huge disaster. The Soviet army, with its officers shattered, continued to show disgraceful performance in the Winter War and repeatedly suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of the German army in Operation Barbarossa, which took place a year later. And what about not only the families of those targeted for purge but also the innocent people who were executed for being acquainted with them? What about the ethnic minorities in the Soviet Union, such as Ukrainians, Jews, Central Asians, Caucasians, and Koreans, who are far from the high-ranking Soviet elite. What on earth did these people who were just workers, office workers, farmers, and students do to die? Therefore, the claim that the Great Purge was a necessary process for the modernization of the Soviet Union and was ultimately beneficial to Soviet society can be seen as nonsense. I've been talking for a long time without realizing it. In any case, there are many theories as to the reason for the military purge. One theory is that Stalin was deceived by a German operation, the other is that the NKVD, which aimed to strengthen its authority by purging the military, incited Stalin to do so, and the last theory was that it was a German operation. There is a theory that it was Stalin's plan to use this as an excuse to carry out purges. It is not known what the direct reason for the Great Purge was, but what is certain is that it is true that Germany was somewhat involved in the Great Purge. How come you know that? I saw it myself. How do you feel, Mr. President? Heydrich and Connery stood motionless and waited for my judgment. Because the plan was so thick, it took some time to read it all. I put down a plan and looked at their faces. Although SD Director Heydrich and his former boss, AFOR Director Connery's, were in competition with each other, I heard that their private relationship was not bad. Not only did we compete, but we also cooperated when we needed to. This was until Connery's was pro-Nazi. Connery's, who had turned anti-Nazi in 1938, began to hand over various secret German information to Britain, and Heydrich, who was a sharp-witted person, began to secretly monitor Connery's. But now it is 1937. This was a time when Connery's still supported the Nazis, as far as I know. That's probably why the two can cooperate with each other and come up with a plan together. My answer was okay. Okay, I give permission. Thank you. There is nothing more enjoyable and rewarding than making communists kill each other. Anyway. As soon as my permission was granted, AFPER and SD immediately began work. He deliberately leaked information to the Soviet Union so that the NKVD would gobble it up and the NKVD's report would end up on Stalin's desk. Stalin receives the report, puts his stamp on it, and it's over. How about it? It's easy, right? The Great Purge began to proceed according to the process I knew. On the first day of the Great Purge, Tukhachevsky was arrested on suspicion of being a spy for Nazi Germany, followed by Rokossovsky. A little later, Alexander Yegorov, Marshal of the Soviet Army and close friend of Stalin, was arrested by the NKVD and stripped of all positions. In 1939, even Vasily Blucher, who was involved in the execution of Tukhachevsky, could not escape the clutches of the purge. While the bloody wind of purges was blowing in the Soviet Union, the Lugauchow incident occurred in the Far East on July 7. A self-made drama created by the dark independence activist Renya Mutagichi for his own advancement. Contrary to popular perception, the Lugauchow incident was not a ploy by the Japanese government and military to create a justification for invading China, but rather a minor skirmish arbitrarily initiated by a single leader. However, this soon led to a confrontation between China and Japan, and eventually Japan completely invaded China. Came to attack. It was the starting point of the Pacific War and the beginning of the Sino-Japanese War, which was comparable to the German-Japanese War in terms of cruelty and barbarity. Japanese troops occupied Beijing, Beiping, and Tianjin. It is said that the Kwantung Army stationed in Manchuria is also crossing the border and moving south. The Chinese Navy is virtually annihilated. Chiang Kai-shek's government seemed to have completely abandoned the Navy and integrated all remaining troops into the army. The Japanese army continued its victory streak across the front, pushing back against the National Revolutionary Army. Not long after the first operation ended, the National Revolutionary Army did not have the strength to deal with the Japanese army. Although the first attack itself ended in victory for the Kuomintang, it was expected that it would take some time to recover due to the significant consumption of troops and materials, but the Japanese army suddenly attacked and they were unable to respond properly. Even in the original history when the sixth first attack operation did not take place, we were pushed back by the Japanese army. What a shame. China filed a complaint against Japan at the League of Nations and asked Britain to mediate, but it was a futile effort. As I said before, the League of Nations was nothing more than a bright apricot and was of no help, and Britain did not show much enthusiasm for mediation itself. The British government was more interested in the Spanish Civil War that broke out right around the corner than in the conflict in the Far East, and they wanted to avoid unnecessary friction with Japan as long as their interests in China were not infringed. When Britain was of little help, Chiang Kai-shek asked for help from the United States. However, America's attitude was no different from that of Britain. As long as America's property and interests are not infringed, there is no reason or need to intervene in the conflict. Japan, embittered by the successive rejections from Britain and the United States, became even more furious. On September 20, the capital Nanjing was attacked by Japanese forces. Britain, France, and the United States protested to Japan, but Japan consistently ignored them. Only then did Britain intervene again, but the result was the same. In desperation, China also asked Germany for help. The judgment was that if Germany was maintaining friendly relations with both China and Japan, Japan would also not agree to negotiations. Opinions within Germany were divided over the dispute between China and Japan. Falkenhausen and Kriebel in China were of the opinion that China should be helped, but the majority opinion was that neutrality should be maintained. Himmler made me angry by suggesting that we should cut ties with China and become closer to Japan. Anyway, this guy often turns people inside out. A few days ago, he was whining about needing a budget to research ancient Aryan history. I can't even hit it, really. Although I was already emotionally rooting for China, my true intention was to avoid getting into trouble with Japan. One day we may cut off Japan, but not now. In Germany, Japanese naval officials were still assisting in the construction of warships. What about torpedoes? If there was a rift with Japan, Japan would immediately withdraw its engineers, and the reconstruction of the Kriegsmarine would also be delayed. For this reason, naval generals, including Raeder, agreed with Himmler's opinion. You don't know people's speed. Both China and Japan are important trading partners for Germany. So, I think it would be a somewhat hasty judgment to only take one side. Surprisingly, this is what Göring said. Perhaps thanks to the fact that his intelligence did not deteriorate due to his morphine addiction, Göring has shown very common sense in his words and actions. Himmler and Raeder, who insisted on supporting Japan, looked at Göring with disapproval. Göring is right. Both China and Japan are indispensable to our Germany. If we side with China, there will be a setback in the reconstruction of the Kriegsmarine, and if we side with Japan, minerals imported from China will be cut off. Himmler and Raeder fell silent at my words. It seems like I finally realized this important thing. Ugh. Ribbentrop, what do you think? Ribbentrop had remained silent until now, perhaps because he had already realized my intention. When given the opportunity to speak, he spoke as if he had been waiting. I also share the same opinion as Mr. President. There will come a time when we will have to choose between the two countries, but for now I think it is better for Germany to maintain the current relationship. Yes. He is also the Minister of Foreign Affairs. You read my thoughts correctly. It was just a compliment, but everyone's gaze towards Ribbentrop turned into jealousy. Even Göring. Anyway, they're so upset because they can't hit each other. Can't we just be a little closer? But since we cannot just refuse China's request for mediation, it seems reasonable to initiate mediation for now. We are careful not to make Japan think that we are taking China's side. Good, very good. I want you to meet with Ambassador Dogo and talk to him. Let's trust and leave this matter to you. I understand, Mr. President. I will definitely live up to your Excellency's expectations. With just a few words of praise, Ribbentrop's clown was on the verge of ascending to heaven. The rest of the humans glared at him as if they were going to kill him even more. Aren't you tired of it? Life is so tiring. Chapter 31 Chang's Era 2. While Ribbentrop met with Togo and conveyed my intention, I contacted Trautmann, the German ambassador to China, and instructed him to take charge of mediation between China and Japan. Coincidentally, the mainstream faction within the Japanese government and military, which was opposed to the expansion of the war, secretly contacted us. Japanese Foreign Minister Koki Hirota met with German ambassador to Japan Herbert von Dirksen and expressed his hope that Germany would step in to mediate between the two countries. Since both China and Japan recognized the United Kingdom and the United States, which were lukewarm on mediation, as being on the other side, they chose Germany as an alternative. Trautmann conveyed China's requirements to Dirksen, and Dirksen conveyed Japan's requirements to Trautmann. Japan's requirements were as follows. 1. Establish a separate autonomous government in Inner Mongolia. 2. Declare the entire North China region as a demilitarized zone, and appoint a person whom the Japanese government can also agree with as administrative minister. Instead, the Japanese government will recognize that the administrative power of North China belongs entirely to the Chinese government. 3. Shanghai should also be declared a demilitarized zone and the management of the city should be delegated to the League of Nations. 4. The Chinese government should immediately abolish its anti-Japanese policy and delete anti-Japanese content from textbooks. And new textbooks compiled jointly by China and Japan will be distributed. 5. The two countries will establish a common air defense front against the Soviet Union and cooperate with each other. 6. Significantly reduce tariffs on Japanese products exported to China. Tariffs on goods exported from China to Japan remain the same. 7. Recognize Manchukuo as the official government. Do you think this makes sense? Isn't his the winner's demand? Trautmann, who received Japan's requirements through Dirksen, was dumbfounded. From Japan's perspective, The level of conditions was adjusted in a somewhat moderate direction, but that was Japan's position, not China's. From the perspective of China, a victim of an unexpected Japanese invasion, Japan's demands were absurd. Even returning the border to before the war and receiving compensation would not be enough, so they put forward conditions that are practically a declaration of surrender as demands. If this isn't a blade robbery, what is it? I also expressed my disapproval, but Japan's position was so firm that there was nothing I could do. Gun. Dirksen also knew that Japan's demands were absurd. Even this was a compromise as much as possible, and at first even the cession of the entire North China region was discussed. In this case, it was withdrawn due to dissuasion from China that it would launch a decisive battle. I understand. First, let me convey this to President Chang. But I think it's better not to get your hopes up. All right. Thank you for your hard work. As Troutman expected, Chiang Kai-shek was furious after hearing Japan's demands. What's wrong with these disgusting bastards? Isn't this saying that they are essentially going to turn China into their puppet state? Troutman also sympathized with Chiang Kai-shek's words, but the problem was that the situation was so bad that China had to accept demands that were tantamount to robbery. Despite the dedicated leadership of the German military advisors and the struggles of the National Revolutionary Army soldiers, the war situation was grim for China. The Navy was destroyed, the Air Force was barely able to survive, and the Army was being pushed back day by day. Chairman, the situation is very bad. Due to successive defeats, the morale of the soldiers is at an all-time low and the people are also agitated. We have no way to stop them now. It's a difficult decision, but sometimes you have to adapt to reality. If the war continues like this, the Japanese army will invade the capital, Nanjing. In order to avoid ruin, it was necessary to strengthen with Japan, even at the cost of humiliation. When not only the moderates but also the hardliners suggested accepting Japan's demands, Chiang Kai-shek had no choice but to accept them with tears in his eyes. But when Chiang Kai-shek accepted Japan's terms, the situation changed. What is this again? You're doing such dirty things behind our backs without us knowing. Isn't it shameful for the imperial soldiers fighting hard on the front lines? The intelligence department of the Chinese Expeditionary Force, which had been spying on the Kuomintang government's wireless communications through wiretapping, reported this to Japan. When the hardliners in the military learned that peace was being discussed without their knowledge, they became angry and asked if the emperor's sacrifice was being ignored. They are all the same in Benaiyang. You guys are such cowards. Are you going to throw it away right now? If you keep acting like this, I have to tell you that it's no fun. The hardliners within the military were a problem, but so was the general administration, which had neither the power nor the will to control them. Going one step further, even Prime Minister Fumimaro Kono and Foreign Minister Koki Hirota, who had initially proposed peace, changed their minds due to the Japanese military's continued victories. The Imperial Army has already advanced to Nanjing? If we do this well, we might be able to win, right? Then is there a need to strengthen ties with China? Is victory clearly in sight? You can't miss this golden opportunity given by heaven. Kono's cabinet, which had previously been committed to peace, changed its position and concluded that the existing requirements were too weak. How dare you put conditions on an invincible empire? On the topic of miserable losers, Kono, confident of victory, actively supported the hardliners in the military and withdrew the existing peace plan. This news was spread to China and Germany through Dirksen. You damn short-legged bastards. Anyway, they're just fucking idiots, so they only do shitty things. I muttered this after receiving Dirksen's report, but it must have been too loud. Everyone in the conference room stopped talking and stared at me. As if he knew that I was feeling uncomfortable, I felt like I was seeing a student standing in front of his parents receiving his report card, sweating profusely and looking anxious. Cho, Mr. President. Whatever the problem. Blomberg waved away his stammering question. I'm not angry at the generals. I was angry for a moment because Japan didn't listen to me. Is that so? The generals were visibly relieved when they realized that they were not the target of the fire. It's crazy to think that people who normally quip that they have stars are trembling at just one word from me. Even in history, Japan's successive victories spurred Germany's mediation and launched an expanded war, and after capturing Nanjing, they committed the famous Nanjing Massacre. The number of Chinese people massacred by Japanese troops in Nanjing was more than 300,000. If you include the people who have been raped and assaulted, it is impossible to even count the number. The swearing I just did came out of my mind because I experienced firsthand how shitty Japan is, and I wasn't truly angry. Really. It is common knowledge that there is no way they know the word satisfaction. I knew this would happen and I planned everything in advance. Ribbentrop? Yes. Tell Troutman and Dirksen. Continue mediation, but never take sides. All right. By the way, tell Troutman one more thing. Evacuate the Germans in Nanjing immediately. Nanjing will soon become a sea of fire. We cannot allow our people to get hurt. That is a reasonable statement. I was touched by the way they thought about the well-being of their people. This guy overdoes it again. Aren't you sick of it? After Shanghai fell, Chiang Kai-shek gathered troops and supplies to defend Nanjing. However, protecting Nanjing was virtually impossible, and the nationalist government knew this. Chiang Kai-shek decided to abandon Nanjing and withdrew major government agencies and the main force of the National Revolutionary Army to Wuhan. Chongqing was chosen as the temporary capital of China. When the nationalist government made the decision to abandon Nanjing, the German withdrawal from Nanjing was already coming to an end. This is a report from Ambassador Trautmann. It is said that all Germans have completed their withdrawal, except for the minimum number of personnel. Thank goodness. Did you say Greibel was in Chongqing? Yes. Falkenhausen is also in Chongqing. Good. It's lunchtime. Let's go eat. I ate chicken for lunch. I couldn't think of things like kimchi or soybean paste stew, but I couldn't give up this chicken, so I gave instructions to the kitchen to make it. The method of making it is also the same as the modern one. After seasoning the chicken, coat it with batter and fry it in oil. For your information, I like hot crispy chicken. Because it was so expensive, I couldn't buy it often. So, I was instructed to add pepper and paprika powder to the chicken I was eating without sparing it. Pack. Isn't it okay to enjoy this level of luxury when you're in a world without the internet and going through hardships beyond your means? Although there are subtle differences from what we eat in the 21st century, chicken itself is a delicious food ingredient, so it cannot be delicious. In particular, the best advantage is that you can eat freshly fried chicken right away. If you add a cold cola to the mix, you can't ask for anything more. How is it? Do you think it's worth eating? Well, the combination of the soft texture of the chicken and the crispy batter goes quite well together. Even Goering, who was confused at first when he saw me eating chicken with my bare hands, seemed to have gotten used to it and started to eat the chicken skillfully. However, Goebbels' expression is not very good. Do you hate chicken? I didn't hear anything like that. Dr. Goebbels? What's the problem? You don't look good. I'm sorry, but I think it's a little too spicy for me. Ugh. There must have been a mistake, so Goebbels' plate was served with spicy fried chicken to suit my taste. For Koreans, who are accustomed to adding sliced Pyongyang peppers to gochujang stew, kimchi as a basic side dish when ordering bibimbap, and eating raw garlic dipped in samjang, this level of spiciness cannot be said to be spicy, but it was not that spicy for 20th century Germans. What was your name? A TV program that brought foreigners to Korea and made them see various things. The French friends who came out there couldn't finish the dak gali because it was spicy, so they left the restaurant. From a Korean perspective, it's not even on the spicy side. What if you're a German who is accustomed to German cuisine, which has almost no spicy dishes? Right now, it probably feels like napalm has exploded in your mouth. Oh, napalm hasn't been released yet. I guess I made a mistake in the kitchen. I will tell you to be careful in the future. Thank you. It seems that it is difficult to extinguish the fire with water alone, so this time, I munched on pickled radish and sauerkraut. Goering has a big smile on his face, as if he really likes the sight of Goebbels in pain. I know we don't get along, but isn't it too blatant that we like each other? Mr. President. After filling my stomach with chicken, I was waiting for dessert when Ribbentrop opened the door and came in. Look, Minister Ribbentrop. How rude to the president. Goering, who hated Ribbentrop as much as Goebbels, fired back. Goebbels also seemed to think that an uninvited guest had intervened. As for an uninvited guest, Goering in front of me is enough. I'm sorry. But I have urgent news to convey to the president. No matter what, looking at the situation, that's it. I am not some kind of tyrant. Yes, Ribbentrop. What's going on? Come on, tell me. Yes, Mr. President. A request has been received from Japan to withdraw its military advisory group from China. Chapter 32 Chang's Era 3. Tiramisu was served as dessert after the meal. I don't know if you know that tiramisu is a dish with a shorter history than budae. It is known that the original food was created in 1967 by a confectioner named Roberto Linguinato in the Veneto region of Italy to recycle leftover coffee and dried, hard cookies. How to make it is simple. Place hard biscuits or cookies on the bottom of a large pan, spread espresso on top, and top with cream cheese. Place cookies on top of the cream cheese, spread coffee on top, and repeat on top of the cream cheese. Then, apply whipped cream and put it in the refrigerator. When the cream hardens, sprinkle it with cocoa powder and serve. In fact, this is the simplest recipe possible. If you want to make it properly, the recipe is more complicated, but this is not a cooking class, so let's skip it. Anyway, as long as it tastes good, it's okay. Since the word tiramisu has not yet appeared in the world, its current name is Furorkitchen, Meaning Führer's cake. Is it because it doesn't have a proper name and is made using the recipe I gave you? So, Japan wants us to withdraw the military advisory group in China? Yes, Mr. President. While waiting for my answer, Ribbentrop broke the tiramisu into pieces with a fork and put it in his mouth. I guess I was hungry. Before, even if I told him to eat, he wouldn't eat until the end. In the original history, Hitler prioritized relations with Japan over China and withdrew the military advisory group in China at Japan's request, which effectively severed diplomatic relations between Germany and China. However, if Japan's request is accepted, Germany will no longer be able to import minerals from China. Part of me wants to say fuck the fuck out of Japan's request, but I can't because I'm in a different position. Japan will not declare war on Germany because we ignore their demands. No matter how crazy the war-crazed warmongers are, they know that going to war with Germany is impossible. Instead, they will withdraw all the engineers sent to Germany. There will be setbacks in ship construction. Lady, I am so worried. There is only one way. You can't just take one side, so you have to find a way to satisfy both sides. That is correct, but what is the method? It's simple. Isn't it okay to pretend to accept Japan's request and not take action? Yes. I don't really understand what you mean. Did I make it too difficult? I think I said it in an easy-to-understand manner. Then I will explain it in an easy-to-understand way. Let's just pretend to accept Japan's request. Leave the military advisory group as is. But Mr. President, the day Japan finds out, there will be significant repercussions. You may be able to fool them right now, but you won't be able to hide it forever. Ribbentrop expressed a negative opinion about what I said. I know that much. The explanation isn't over yet, so keep listening. I can issue a summons order to the military advisory group, but if they don't follow my orders, shouldn't that be okay? No, are you saying we should at least encourage them to protest? Goering asked back in surprise. It's a protest, a protest. It might seem that way. Only on the outside. The idea is to kiss in a way that will make it look like a protest in the eyes of Japan. By telling Falkenhausen in advance, he will make it seem like he is going against my orders on his own will. Then Japan won't be able to say anything to us either. I clearly gave a summons order, but he refused my order. Ooh. Goering and Ribbentrop were so impressed that they could not keep their mouths shut. But Goebbels thought differently. Mr. President, this is indeed a wise decision, but it may cause unexpected controversy. No matter how well crafted the play is, wouldn't it be ridiculed by countries around the world if it can't control even one of its own generals? I don't know if the people will be shaken either. Goebbels was concerned that others would see his leadership as imperfect. This is something I hadn't thought of either. Indeed, geniuses think differently from ordinary people. That too. Then I guess I'll have to give Falkenhausen a more plausible reason. Is there a way I can give Japan a big thumbs up while keeping my prestige as minimal as possible? Let's think about it. Wouldn't it be possible to do it this way? The president sent you? Yes, General. Kriebel handed Falkenhausen a brown envelope. On the outside of the envelope was a red label indicating top secret. When I opened the envelope, a document came out. Falkenhausen, who was reading the document without even making a sound, soon slapped his forehead in admiration. And then he laughed heartily. Huh. I can't believe there was a method like this. What does it say? Kriebel did not know what the contents of the document were. Falkenhausen said, lowering his voice. It is said that Japan has requested the withdrawal of its advisory group from China. In return, he said he would provide Germany with additional support for the technology and materials needed to build ships. No, so? First of all, the president decided to withdraw the advisory group from China. Huh. Unbelievable. Kriebel looked shocked at Hitler's decision. Falkenhausen, seeing the embarrassment on Kriebel's face, grinned. At least officially. Officially? What does that mean? I mean it literally. Since it is difficult to ignore Japan's request due to naval-related issues, we will just pretend to listen to what they say. We will leave the minimum number of people and send the rest away, and I will remain here. It will be said in Berlin that I was lying down with an endemic disease that can only be found in China. Falkenhausen's leadership could be questioned if he remained in China by protesting, so he used the excuse of feigning illness to remain in China. If Japan protests why Falkenhausen is still in China, the plan is to respond by saying, "You can't force someone to come to Germany today and tomorrow." Falkenhausen could not help but express his admiration for the Führer's idea again. Witzel Eben, who was a close friend of Falkenhausen, ridiculed Hitler as an ignorant sergeant who did not know anything about military science, but he was not a very intelligent person when he came up with such an expedient. This is a top secret, so only the minimum number of people should know about it. I will personally convey this to President Chang. Understood, General. December 13, 1937, the Japanese army captured Nanjing, the capital of China. The Japanese army that occupied Nanjing mercilessly massacred the civilians, remnants of the Chinese army, and prisoners who remained in the city before they could escape. Women were raped, sons raped their mothers and fathers raped their daughters under the coercion and intimidation of the Japanese military, and children who could not even walk were bayoneted or thrown alive into a stove. Thousands of babies were cut into pieces or thrown alive to be fed to military dogs. John Rabe, an executive at the German Siemens Company and member of the Nazi Party who remained in Nanjing, vividly witnessed the massacre by the Japanese army before his eyes. Shocked, he created an international safety zone with the remaining foreigners in Nanjing and evacuated the Chinese there. He saved 250,000 Chinese people, but he had no choice but to be repatriated to Germany due to the Japanese government's protest against Germany. On the day he left Nanjing, John Rabe made a promise. "I will definitely go to Germany and inform people of the horrors of Nanjing." And he said he would definitely come back here. Upon returning to Germany, Rabe immediately wrote a letter to Hitler. He wrote in a letter everything he saw in Nanjing. Prisoners who were slaughtered alive, women who were raped, children who were crushed under truck wheels, and elderly people who were buried alive. I had to inform the president of what was happening in Nanjing and save the suffering Chinese people. That was the only thought on his mind. He could never forget the sight of innocent people being massacred. "I'm thirsty." As soon as I finished writing the letter, the thirst I had been suppressing for so long came flooding back to me. I went to the kitchen and was about to pour water into a cup when someone knocked on the door. "Mr. John Rabe? Is John Rabe there? Who is it? Are you a guest?" Rabe, thinking that they might have been sent from headquarters, readily opened the door. But the customers were not Siemens employees. 3 or 4 burly men wearing trench coats and fedoras looked down at John Rabe. Rabe flinched involuntarily at the sad atmosphere emanating from the men. "Mr. John Rabe? Are you Mr. John Rabe?" "Yes. I'm Jan Labiaman." "It came from the Gestapo." "Yes." "No, why did the Gestapo come to me?" "Wherefore?" "We need you to accompany us." Meanwhile, Rabe was sitting with Gestapo agents in the back seat of their black Volkswagen. Due to the sudden visit of the Gestapo, Rabe was unable to understand what was happening. "Where are you going now?" "I can't tell you that. You'll find out when you get there," the Gestapo agent behind the wheel answered. It was a formal tone, but at the same time, it meant not to ask any more questions. Rabe wanted to at least know why he was being taken to them, but the sad atmosphere surrounding him made it difficult for him to say anything. "Did I do something wrong before?" I tried to shake my head, but I didn't do anything to find fault. "So what is it?" The place where the Volkswagen arrived was the presidential residence. "Cho, Mr. President." Rabe was first shocked by the fact that the Gestapo suddenly visited the residence and put him in a car without any explanation. The place they arrived at was the presidential residence. And the second shock was that Hitler's Führer came out to meet him. It was a situation that I could not believe was real. How on earth did this happen? What surprised Rabe even more was that the Führer already knew in detail everything that had happened to him, even though the letter had not been sent yet. "I heard what you did in Nanjing." He did something very righteous. "I just did what any human being should do." Rabe did not know why the president knew the details of his actions in Nanjing, but he was thrilled that he had called him here to hear his story. Taking on something that no one else would do because it is too dangerous is not something that can be done with ordinary courage. But the teacher took the lead and did it. "You are the true hero of the Germanic people." That's too much praise. To hear praise from the president. Is this a dream? It's too vivid for a dream. If this was a dream, I want it to never wake up. I heard that you had a lot of trouble in Nanjing. I know you didn't eat on time, so please eat before it gets cold. I served a grand dinner for John Rabe. Even he, an executive at Siemens who had lived a comfortable life, was wide-eyed, wondering if this was his first time seeing such a sumptuous dinner. It reminds me of the Berlin Olympics. Teacher Sun Ki-jeng also showed the same reaction. Nam Soo-young and Jesse Owens too. "No, did you prepare this much for me?" "That's right." "Why?" "For some reason. If we're treating a righteous person like you, shouldn't we treat ourselves like this?" Jan Rabe. Despite being a member of the Nazi Party, he was far from racism and was a righteous man of the century who saved 250,000 Chinese people by taking advantage of the fact that he was a citizen of Germany, a friendly nation of Japan, during the Nanjing massacre. After the war, he was praised as the Buddha of Nanjing in China. However, despite his brilliant achievements, his life after the Nanjing massacre was extremely depressing. After returning to Germany, Rabe tried to write a letter to Hitler to convey the horrors of Nanjing, but Himmler, who was concerned about worsening relations with Japan, stole the letter and Rabe had to be investigated by the Gestapo. Still, since he had not committed an anti-regime act, He was soon released with only a mild warning from the Gestapo, never reveal what happened in Nanjing, but after Germany's defeat, his record as a member of the Nazi Party became an issue and he was arrested by the Allied forces. Handed over to trial. After much hardship, he was released after being proven not to have committed war crimes, but he lost all his assets during the trial and was left to suffer in poverty. After hearing this news, the national government collected donations and sent them to Rabe, but his hardships continued. If he had lived a little longer, he would have lived comfortably, receiving various supports and treatment from the national government like Falkenhausen, but Rabe died of a stroke in 1950, 5 years after the end of the war. This is truly a bitter story. But who am I? Isn't this Adolf Hitler, the Führer of the Third Reich? It is a position that can sufficiently care for one person's life. Does it suit your taste? This is my first time eating such great food. Rabe's hands were busy preparing the veal steak. She drank champagne and tasted caviar in her spare time. After eating sash retort and pineapple for dessert, we chatted calmly. Mr. President, as you know, Nanjing is hell. Rabe's first words were an outcry about the barbarism of the Japanese army. I know this too, but I listened to him in silence. The Japanese army is so barbaric that it cannot be considered the army of a civilized country. He killed people so recklessly that the bottoms of his shoes were soaked in blood. We must expose this fact to the international community right now to put pressure on Japan to stop the war. You are right. But, sir, I am afraid the task will be difficult. Chapter 33 Chang's Era 4. Yes. No, why? Rabe was visibly embarrassed. He must have never dreamed that after listening intently to his story, he would suddenly say it was unreasonable. Now engineers sent from Japan are helping rebuild our navy. However, if we criticize indiscriminately, Japan will definitely withdraw its engineers. The rebuilding of the navy will also be delayed. It is truly shameful that the German Führer would say such a thing, but there is a distance between ideals and reality. Therefore, it seems difficult for the German government to criticize Japan. Is that so? Rabe could not hide his disappointment. He must have believed that I would fully support him, but he must have felt betrayed. Are you disappointed? Yes. Ah, no. Well, that is. I know how you feel, teacher. You must have been disappointed. It sounds like it might be a bit difficult to do it with such high expectations. But don't get me wrong. I, too, have no intention of quietly burying in history the actions committed by those with short legs. Yes. You have to roll your head. Let's think about it. The German government will not show much interest in this incident. However, how can we prevent the minor deviations of individual German citizens? What do you mean? I faced Rabe and smiled. I have a plan. The first day of March 1938, the following articles were written in large letters on the front pages of newspapers around the world. Japan rapes Nanjing. The bloody festival held by the Japanese army in Nanjing. Destroy and rape whatever you can. Official order from the Japanese military: rape and massacre regardless of gender or age. Japan's barbarism has been unmasked. Rabe, who went to the neutral country of Switzerland, informed people of the massacre committed by the Japanese army in Nanjing with photos he had taken in Nanjing. Newspaper companies, eager to find material that would grab people's attention, immediately published John Rabe's photo and testimony on the front page of the newspaper. The news of the Nanjing massacre, first reported by Swiss newspapers, soon crossed borders and spread to countries around the world. From renowned media outlets such as the New York Times and the Times to small media outlets in small local cities whose existence is barely known to the world, everyone was busy publishing Nanjing news in their newspapers. The news of the large-scale massacre committed by the Japanese army in Nanjing had a great shock around the world. Until now, the details of what happened in Nanjing were unknown due to Japan's thorough concealment, but now everyone in the world has heard the news that a massacre took place in Nanjing. In addition, racist newspapers that viewed Japan's rapid growth with yellow eyes with disapproval further fueled this controversy. Japanese embassies located in capitals around the world, such as London, Paris, Warsaw, and Washington, D.C., were attacked. Protests denouncing Japan's invasion continued, and calls for a boycott of Japanese products gained strength. The Japanese government immediately issued a statement refuting the whole thing, saying it was a fabrication, but it had no effect. Japan's claims were completely buried as not only John Rabe but also foreigners who returned alive from Nanjing gave testimony one after another. The disgusting and ugly face of Japan, which prides itself on being a civilized country. The title was chosen artistically. As with the provocative title, the content of the article itself was also provocative. Somehow, I felt more disdain for the yellow race than criticism of the Japanese military, but I couldn't help it. In Europe in 1938, the perception of the yellow race was something between monkeys and humans. In any case, the original plan to shame the Japanese government was a huge success. You're going to be in a lot of trouble with this, you short-legged bastards. Mr. President, Ambassador Togo of Japan has arrived. Already? You came so quickly. As expected, Japan has strongly protested this incident. Shichinori Togo was originally an opponent of war, so he spoke very politely, but since he was a diplomat, he did not hide how angry his country was and spoke directly. I am truly sorry to have to say this, but now some in the headquarters are even saying that Germany may have betrayed Japan. Huh, that's too much to say. How could we have ever expected something like this to happen? I deliberately raised my voice as if I was greatly disappointed by Dogo's words. How was I supposed to know that a man named John Lave would go to Switzerland and not inside Germany to do such a thing? And even if he knew, he did it in Switzerland, so what can I do? He wants to invade Switzerland? When I came out strong, even Dogo, a seasoned diplomat, was taken aback. Ah, that's just what they say, the Japanese government's official position is, shall I tell you now? At your request, I also withdrew our military advisory group from China. Do you know how much China protested about that? I heard that they would no longer export minerals to Germany, or even that they would risk severing diplomatic ties. Does Japan know how busy I was trying to explain it? I did my best to advance Japan-Germany relations. Any request you made to return home was granted. But to show such disrespect due to a personal deviation committed by one of our citizens. Is this really something friendly countries would do? Dogo must have never expected me to be this angry, so he took out a handkerchief and was busy wiping away the sweat. I'm sorry if you felt uncomfortable. I have nothing to say. I also know very well that this is not the German government's official position. However, my job is to convey Japan's opinion to the president as it is. Please be generous and understand. Tell this to your home country. We will make efforts to resolve this situation, but Japan should also refrain from making irresponsible speculations and criticism. If you consider Germany a friendly country, I will do that. And let me ask you something. The military advisory group has been withdrawn as requested by Japan, but when will the promised additional dispatch of engineers and ship blueprints arrive? You're not going to just take it and then wash your mouth, are you? What are you saying? Japan is not a country that carelessly betrays trust with others. Is that so? So what was the attack on Pearl Harbor? Please explain. However, there are reports that Germany's General Falkenhayn is still in China. Is that true? Dogo's expression, who had been busy making excuses just a few seconds ago, changed. This is the beginning of a counterattack, is this it? They probably want to say that it is false to say that they withdrew the military advisory group citing Falkenhayn as the reason. It's a clever move. It's laughable. Maybe I didn't expect all this. It's true. Why? You said you withdrew the advisory group, but isn't the most important person still in China? You say that you suddenly got sick and that it is difficult for you to go to Germany. What should I do? I ordered Falkenhayn to be summoned again, but he just kept repeating the same thing. I have now instructed you to check whether what he said is true or not, so you will find out soon. If he lied to me, he will have to pay the price. Because I will do whatever it takes to make it happen. Are you satisfied now? I understand. Dogo returned home with little more than a sweat, let alone any income. Dogo's back to the embassy looked smaller and more shabby than ever. The next morning, Togo's radio message to Japan was deciphered by our code team and delivered to my desk. Purple, the encryption system used by Japan, was famous for its extremely lax security system. As a result of the meeting with Führer Hitler, it appeared that the Führer was truly unaware of this situation. He also promised to resolve the Falkenhayn issue as soon as possible. Stupid guys. Even after all this, you keep talking nonsense about the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere and all that. Your dreams are too dreamy. What is your schedule today? You have a meeting scheduled with officials from the propaganda department in the morning, and you decided to attend a demonstration of a new submachine gun in the afternoon and meet with officials. That's right, indeed. I'm already looking forward to it. The MP-38 submachine gun developed by Nazi Germany in 1938 is a luxury submachine gun with excellent appearance and performance. However, since it is produced by cutting from whole steel, it has the disadvantage of being time-consuming and expensive. Therefore, the Nazis began improving this machine to produce it more cheaply and quickly, and the MP-40 was born. From the beginning, I instructed that this thing be made by press processing, which is cheaper and faster than cutting processing. In other words, the MP-38 released now is the original MP-40. As the MP-38 was introduced, the organization of the German army was also overhauled. During World War II, the German army had one machine gun in each squad in charge of the squad's firepower, and the rest were bolt-action rifles such as the Kar-98K. It was a structure that had no choice but to be pushed back by firepower from the armed US and Soviet troops. It was not until the end of the war that the German military realized that the existing method of organization was problematic and attempted to strengthen the firepower of the squad by providing large numbers of automatic weapons such as the MP-40 and STG-44, which had more firepower than bolt-action rifles, but this did not have much effect as the war situation was already tense. I plan to produce as many of these MP-38s as possible and distribute them to the entire army. It will be difficult to replace all of the existing Kar-98K and Ju-98 in a short period of time, but replacing them now will help prevent future disasters. How is the development of the new rifle going? How is it going? Yes, Mr. President. Development is progressing as planned. You don't have to worry. Hugo Schmeisser, who developed the first submachine gun, the MP-18, answered. The new rifle he is currently developing is the STG-44, recorded as the first assault rifle in history, and was scheduled to become the German military's service rifle to replace the existing Kar-98K. I will only trust the doctor. I hope to see good results quickly. Please just leave it to me. Through the efforts of Minister of Munitions Fritz Todt and Minister of Construction Albert Speer, Germany's logistics system was also reorganized to be significantly more efficient than before. Although there are still many areas that need to be fixed, thanks to their efforts, inefficient operation and production, which were chronic problems in the German military system, were greatly improved, and the production of military supplies increased, which was a notable achievement. I have very high expectations for my two ministers. In war, the factory is like the heart. Just as you can't live if your heart stops, you can't go to war if the factory stops. Please do not forget that the future of Germany rests on your shoulders. Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks to His Excellency's delegation of full authority, we were able to obtain cooperation from companies. Minister Speer also gave me great help. No. Didn't Minister Todt plan at all? I just gave instructions. Todt and Speer showed a heartwarming performance by giving the ball to each other. I only see Göring, Goebbels, and Himmler, who are busy criticizing and fighting each other all the time, but seeing these two makes me feel like my eyes are being purified. When Todt died in a plane crash in East Prussia on February 8, 1942, Speer, who had been Minister of Construction, became Minister of Munitions at Hitler's recommendation and overhauled the German industrial system, which was at the peak of efficiency, from head to toe. Thanks to Speer's efforts, Germany's production of military supplies increased even as the war situation worsened, reaching its peak in 1944. What's worse, is it even said that Germany's defeat was postponed by a year thanks to Speer? Conversely, it also meant that the production of military supplies had been carried out in a shoddy manner until then. However, this does not mean that Todt is an incompetent friend, so please do not misunderstand. Many of Speer's plans were planned by his predecessor, Todt, and Todt devoted himself to work passionately, even reducing his sleeping hours. There are many scholars who argue that without Todt, Speer's reforms would not have had much effect. To put it simply, it can be said that Todt laid out the framework and Speer added the flesh. And the production of heavy artillery, as emphasized by His Excellency the President, has entered an upward trend. The development of the 15 cm flat sand gun is also nearing completion. That's great. I'm not a fagot, but I feel like proposing to the minister. I decline. The problem with the German army that people are not aware of is that its artillery firepower is weaker than that of the Soviet army. Not only was the Soviet Union so deceptive, but the German army lacked heavy artillery as well as tanks and trucks, so they had to actively utilize captured French and Soviet-made heavy artillery. However, since the quantity was insufficient, increasing the production of heavy artillery was a very important issue. In addition, because there were very few plain artillery guns that had a longer range than howitzers, when the Soviet army bombarded them with plain artillery, German artillerymen had to work hard to fire large artillery fire with howitzers that had a short range. How sad this is. And, as the President mentioned last time, the work to modify the chassis of Panzer No. 2 and turn it into a self-propelled artillery is progressing without a hitch. The body design has already been completed, and only the fighting compartment design needs to be completed. Good, very good. I think I can go to bed in a good mood today. With the advent of the 4th Panzer, there were many opinions that it would be a waste to retire the 2nd Panzer, which was scheduled to be retired. Since I also had the same thought, I gave instructions to the Ordnance Bureau to develop self-propelled artillery based on the chassis of Tank No. 2. The newly developed self-propelled howitzer was scheduled to be equipped with a 105 cm Lef 18 light howitzer. There was also an idea to add a 15 cm heavy gun, but it was rejected because it was obvious that it would put a strain on the hull. In addition, the development of self-propelled artillery, recovery, anti-aircraft, and bridge tanks that are modified versions of the Panzer IV is also in progress. In the case of anti-tank guns, a prototype of the Pak 38 was just about to be shipped. Ah, it's so good. I was about to go to bed, proud of having had a worthwhile day, when someone knocked on my bedroom door. Mr. President? This is Cross. Cross. What are you doing at this hour? The owner of the knock was my personal bodyguard, Carl Wilhelm Cross. Cross was originally a naval cadet, but was selected as my bodyguard and now wore the rank of SS second lieutenant. He's tall, strong, gentle, and quick-witted, making him the perfect bodyguard. I was going to tell him to report anything serious the next morning, but Cross struck first. It's urgent. I have to tell you now. Speak. What on earth is going on? They say Minister Blomberg and General Fritsch were in a car accident. What? Chapter 34 Tenrant Problem 1. Blomberg, who was Minister of Defense and Field Marshal of Germany, was an ardent supporter of Hitler, but did not get along well with Göring and Himmler. Göring coveted Blomberg's position as Commander-in-Chief of the Wehrmacht, and Himmler often clashed with Blomberg, who opposed the expansion of the SS. The two, who had similar interests, came up with an ingenious and dirty plan to oust Blomberg. The plan was to lower Blomberg's prestige by spreading rumors that Ernegrun, Blomberg's secretary and new wife, was a prostitute. A German field marshal who risks his life for honor would take a prostitute as his wife. What greater shame could there be than this? Hitler, who hated the Junkers but was just as conservative in his sexual views, became furious when he learned that Ernegrun had been a prostitute in the past, and ordered Blomberg to divorce him. However, Blomberg refused and was eventually forced to resign from the military. Werner von Fritsch, the commander-in-chief of the army, followed Hitler like Blomberg, but was strongly opposed to Himmler's plan to expand the SS. Himmler and Heydrich framed Fritsch as a homosexual and forced him to resign from the military. However, unlike the original history, I, who knew the truth, did not force Blomberg and Fritsch to resign despite persistent requests from Göring, Himmler, and Heydrich. They may sometimes express opposing opinions, but they are basically capable and their loyalty is certain, so what are you trying to do by kicking them out? I'm sorry that Blomberg's wife used to be a prostitute, but that doesn't give me the right to interfere with their love. Neither does anyone else. What can I say that they love each other no matter what happened in the past? Mr. President, this is a matter of prestige for the military and the nation. The marshal's wife is a whore. If other countries find out, they will point fingers. So what? Blomberg himself said he was fine. How can you, who are not the party involved, ask someone else for a divorce? Don't make me angry anymore and go. Where is the evidence that Fritsch is a homo? According to eyewitness testimony, Fritsch did that with a man in the park at night. The victim's tears are proof. I fell asleep saying the same bullshit. Where does this drug sell? Heydrich, the only evidence you're talking about is eyewitness testimony. Anyone can testify. If someone comes to me and says they saw you fucking a man, should I believe them? It was a month ago that when I showed a firm attitude, Göring, Himmler, and Heydrich could no longer say anything. However, Blomberg and Fritsch, whom they had been plotting for so long, got into a car accident. Blomberg suffered a loss of his left arm, 3 or 4 broken ribs, and a concussion, so he underwent major surgery. Fritsch is unconscious. Could it be that Göring, Himmler, and Heydrich were trying to kill him by disguising it as an accident? Those guys were enough to do that. I immediately called these 3. It's unfair, Mr. President. We really don't know. It's only been a month since you guys chewed these 2 apart. Would you believe that if I were you? Bebet, Mr. President. This matter really has nothing to do with us. How dare we do something like that? Really? Please believe me. All 3 desperately claimed their innocence. Even Heydrich, who was famous for his own pace, must have been embarrassed to see him sweating like a elementary school student who got caught making a mistake. If this were acting, these guys would all be best actors. Even if Choi Minutes sick comes, it will be difficult to act like these guys. Looking at their reaction, it really seems like these guys aren't the culprits, so what? My doubts were answered as Blomberg's condition improved. When I heard that Blomberg's condition was improving, I packed a gift and went to visit him. And there I was able to hear the full story of the incident from his own mouth. The truth was much more absurd and outrageous than I expected. Drunk driving? Are you? And directly? Yes. Really? Blomberg and Fritsch were close friends both publicly and privately. Something interesting happened recently, so the 2 of us drank together for the first time in a while. Blomberg is in a better mood. He decided to go for round 2 with Fritsch. When they got out, the waiting driver tried to get behind the wheel, but Blomberg ordered them to leave, saying he would drive himself. Despite the driver's dissuasion, he sat down in the driver's seat himself. Coincidentally, there wasn't a single car on the road. Should we speed it up a bit? Is it fun? Shall we raise it a little more? As I was turning a curve, a passerby suddenly appeared. Blomberg, trying to avoid a passerby, jerked the steering wheel and bang on the street tree along the way. This was the truth about the Blomberg-Fritsch traffic accident. A week later, Fritsch regained consciousness, but it was impossible for him to return to work due to the after-effects of the accident. According to the doctors, long-term treatment is needed. Since the positions of Minister of Defense and Commander-in-Chief of the Army suddenly became vacant, follow-up action was urgent. Wilhelm Keitel was appointed as Minister of Defense, and Walter von Brauchitsch was appointed as Commander-in-Chief of the Army. Originally, Hitler tried to appoint Walter von Renaud, who was an ardent Nazi among the pro-Nazi generals in the military, as Minister of Defense or Commander-in-Chief of the Army, but the decision was aborted due to the military's desperate opposition. I also thought about Renaud, but there was no need to appoint him and incur opposition from the military. Unlike Renaud, Keitel and Brauchitsch were recognized for their abilities within the army, were well liked, and were personally passionate followers of Hitler. Therefore, successful bid. Göring, who had coveted the position of Minister of Defense, openly showed his disappointment when I told him that I would nominate Keitel as my next Minister of Defense. Himmler, who had also been in conflict with Brauchitsch over SS issues, was also embarrassed to hear that Brauchitsch had been appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Army. Now that Blomberg and Fritsch, who were saboteurs, have left, they must have decided that their world has came to their own. I'm betting that these guys got together and drank champagne. What are the facial expressions? You look like you don't like my decision? Oh, no, Mr. President. What do you know, you guys? It's all visible on your face. Still, they followed whatever I said without saying a word, so there was no point in continuing to just give them water. If you use a stick, you should also give a carrot. The day after I appointed Keitel and Brauchitsch as Minister of Defense and Commander-in-Chief of the Army, I conferred on Göring the title of Marshal of the Reich. It was thought that this method might work for Göring, who was obsessed with collecting gam too. Thank you, Mr. President. There will be no greater honor in my life. That's enough. I hope you will continue to work hard in your work. As expected, Göring was happy like a child. Simple guy. Is the title Marshal of the Empire really that good? The name is grandiose, but the treatment is no different from that of ordinary enemies. Well, if you're satisfied, that's fine. I didn't forget to give Himmler a gift as well. I persuaded Keitel and Brauchitsch to expand the size of the Waffen-SS, the SS combat unit, to 3 brigades and to create a new tank company for each brigade. We will definitely make the Waffen-SS the best unit in Germany, surpassing the army, Mr. Führer. Himmler also expressed great satisfaction with these measures. I guess I can organize my house like this. But I feel like something is lacking. Why? Feeling somewhat empty, I naturally shifted my gaze to the globe on my desk. In the middle of Europe is Germany, next to Germany is Poland, and under Poland is Czechoslovakia. A Siamese twin nation created by combining 2 ethnic groups that look similar but are distinctly south of each other. According to Hitler's words, a country that is a byproduct of national self-determination. Look at that hateful border that seems to pierce Germany's side. I guess I'll have to take a look at it soon. Most residents living in the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia, bordering Germany, are of German descent. After World War I, when U.S. President Wilson re-established the principle of national self-determination, German residents of the Sudetenland also insisted on independence. However, Czechoslovakia thoroughly suppressed this. Although national self-determination was re-established, the reason for the oppression was that it did not apply to the Germans, who were the losers. The Allies also did not want Germany's territory to expand, so they supported the suppression of German residents in Czechoslovakia. In this way, the Germans of the Sudetenland had to live quietly, submissive to the Czechoslovakian government. However, when Adolf Hitler, appeared, the German residents of the Sudetenland, who had been living quietly, gradually began to speak out. I have been mentioning the Sudetenland issue since May. At first, in passing in a speech to the public, then in a tone that said it was a fairly important issue, and then in earnest in the next speech. Dear German people, do you know what is happening to your compatriots in the neighboring Sudetenland of Czechoslovakia? Our compatriots, our brothers who share the same blood as us. We are having a hard time day by day under the oppression of the Czechoslovakian government. Czechoslovakia was able to achieve independence thanks to national self-determination. But paradoxically, the Germans living in the Sudetenland were not granted independence. Just because the Germans are inferior losers. Freedom was not granted to the compatriots of the Sudetenland. All they were given was a vow of slavery and a life of humiliation. Even at this very moment, the Czechoslovakian government is busy trampling on the wishes of the German people mercilessly and beating them with sticks. An elderly man was brutally beaten by Czechoslovakian police yesterday for carrying a German flag. The old man had broken his ribs and cracked his skull. The villagers rushed him to the hospital, but even there, the doctor refused to treat him because he was German. In the end, the old man died that evening. Does this make sense? Why do tragedies like this have to happen, and why can't we prevent them? I say this here. The Czechoslovakian government must immediately stop its violent and barbaric atrocities. And listen to the voices of the German people. If you really want peace. Wow. Heil Hitler. Naturally, Czechoslovakia reacted sensitively to my mention of the Sudetenland issue. The Czechoslovakian government fiercely criticized me, asking if I was planning to start a war, and warned that if I directly rioted against German residents, they would declare special martial law in the Sudetenland area. Nevertheless, German residents committed sabotage against the Czechoslovakian government and organized self-defense groups to rob the military's armory and attack police stations. Czechoslovakia called up reserves and deployed troops to the German border, while requesting support from allies France and the Soviet Union. However, the response from both countries was lukewarm. In September, the conflict between Germany and Czechoslovakia became more severe. I instructed the Wehrmacht to deploy troops to the Czechoslovakian border. This time too, the military screamed at my decision. Mr. President, war is impossible. If we start a war when rearmament has not yet been completed, we will be defeated. These were the words of Beck, who was always opposed to anything I said. He openly showed on his face that if I were not the president, he would have given me a beating right away. General Beck is right. War with Czechoslovakia is impossible. Please reconsider. Witzel Eben and Canaries also supported Beck. Göring also cautiously expressed his opinion to me that an immediate war was unreasonable, and Himmler silently glanced at the generals who expressed their opposition to me in a harsh tone. Goebbels also kept silent because it was not his area of expertise. I don't know what these people are talking about. Did I say let's go to war? I just ordered troops to be deployed on the Czechoslovakian border to threaten them. That's it, isn't it? I don't think now is the time to play with words. Beck said in an absurd tone. Because his tone was so explicit, the trio of Göring, Himmler, and Goebbels glared at him, and the other generals all looked at me and at Beck. I, too, was angry at Beck's words, but I acted calm on the outside. Talk loudly. Because I don't have much time to live anyway. It's a shame that what I said sounded like a joke. But I really have no intention of going to war. As I just said, the idea is only to intimidate. I also know that if we start a war now, we cannot guarantee victory. It may come as a surprise, but I really hate gambling. I'm the type of person who tries to take the safest route possible, even if I'm on the road. Why did someone who hates gambling stumble over the Czechoslovakia issue? Is that the safe path that the president considers? Look, General. How dare you say such rude words to His Excellency the President? When Beck scoffed, Göring also shouted as if he couldn't stand it anymore. I raised one hand to stop Göring. I think I misunderstood, so let me explain. Neither Czechoslovakia nor the UK know that we want to avoid war. By now, they must be worried and thinking that I really want to start a war. I have no intention of exploiting their weaknesses this time, just like I did in the Rhineland. France formed an alliance with Czechoslovakia, but going to war with Germany was burdensome, and Britain also found war with Germany burdensome. The two countries, who outwardly criticized Germany's ambition to invade, but later feared that war might really break out, made the worst choice, believing that war should be avoided at all costs. Believing that war could be avoided if Germany's demands were met, they intimidated their ally, Czechoslovakia, into giving up the Sudetenland. When even the people they trusted abandoned them, Czechoslovakia had no choice but to cede the Sudetenland to Germany. Hitler regretted until his death that he had missed the golden opportunity to turn Czechoslovakia into a sea of fire. The difference from actual history is that Italy, which would have supported Germany, is now actively supporting Czechoslovakia, but it was not a matter of great concern. Even in the original history, Italy's military was ruined due to excessive spending in Ethiopia and Spain, and here, it suffered even more damage in Ethiopia. Even if the Italian army was damaged beyond its original history, 2 divisions would be enough to stop it. Beck was not persuaded in the end, but Keitel and Brauchitsch differed. I called them both together and promised them that I had no intention of going to war with Czechoslovakia and that if the British Empire came out strong, I would be the first to withdraw. But there are still those within the Wehrmacht who firmly believe that I want to go to war. I would be grateful if 2 people would come forward and clearly convey my intentions to them. I understand, Mr. President. We will do our best to convince those friends. Göring and Himmler were the ones who lived and died by my orders, so there was no need to persuade them. Letter also said that he fully supports my wishes. After Letter's persuasion was completed, I called Heydrich. When Heydrich came to my office after being called, I handed him the document I had written myself. Listen to me, Heydrich. From now on, we will strictly monitor those on this list. Do whatever it takes to monitor their every move and report it to me. I understand, Mr. President. Heydrich, with his quick-thinking mind, did not question my command at all. He carefully put the documents I gave him into a file and put them in his briefcase. Do you have any additional instructions? There is none. Not yet. I'll call you when it happens. Stop going. Cleaning will be carried out as soon as the work is completed. I don't think they'll notice, but it still doesn't hurt to be careful. If you want to live for a long time, you have to beat on the stone bridge and cross it. Chapter 35 Tenrent Problem 2. As friction between Germany and Czechoslovakia increased, Britain was put on alert. Britain's ally France declared that it would immediately declare war on Germany if its ally Czechoslovakia was invaded, but Britain was not unaware that this was just lip service. France asked for help. It's not exactly support, but they want to know if Britain will join the war if France declares war on Germany. Isn't that what it is? I am indeed. It was almost as if they were admitting that they were bluffing by asking if they wanted to help them since they were fighting among themselves. France had many internal problems, but Britain also had many problems of its own. Unlike the Navy, the Army had no divisions that could be deployed immediately when war broke out, and public opinion was extremely negative about participation in the war. However, if they did not participate in the war, they were worried about protests from France, and in the worst-case scenario, France could be conquered by Germany. In this case, Britain had to face Germany alone in Western Europe, and it was truly burdensome for Britain, which prided itself on being the world's strongest, to face Germany alone. The British government was in trouble. If you take France's side, public opinion will rise, and if you wait and see the situation, there will be criticism from France. Is there any way to end it on a good note? How about this? Did you think of any good moves? The reason Hitler is demanding the Sudetenland now is not because of the Germans living in the Sudetenland. Yes. According to national self-determination, as Hitler claimed, the Germans of the Sudetenland have the right to choose their own homeland. But don't you know that those are just words? Even if it is only a superficial justification, the justification lies with Germany. In other words, if the Sudetenland is handed over as Germany demands, the dispute will be resolved naturally. If we hand over the Sudetenland, Germany will be satisfied and war can be avoided. If war doesn't break out, we can keep our promise to France and calm public opinion, so wouldn't it be like killing two birds with one stone? If we hand over the Sudetenland, which was the cause of the conflict, to Germany, war can be avoided. It was an incredible logic, no different from saying that if you give the money you have to a robber, you will not lose your life, but the British government seriously thought that this incredible logic was not bad. In any case, the important thing for them was to avoid war, which was not Czechoslovakia's position. I will personally go to Germany and meet Hitler. I'll have to meet him in person and see what his intentions are. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain headed to Germany. September 15, 1938. Munich, Germany. Unit, stand at attention. As the British national anthem played by the SS military band rang out, the Black SS Honor Guard made a bold move. On the flagpole behind them, the Hakenkreuz flag and the Union Jack were flying simultaneously. The sight of the SS military band playing the British national anthem God Save the King under the Union Jack was not a common sight. Chamberlain nodded with satisfaction as he watched the near-perfect review of the SS Honor Guard. The soldiers' discipline is well established. Indeed, it is worthy of the name SS. That's too much praise. German Führer Hitler quipped at Chamberlain's praise. The SS soldiers did not blink as the German and British delegations walked by. It was the result of arduous training repeated every day. As soon as the meeting began, Chamberlain suggested to Hitler that they should talk openly, man to man. President, you have come this far, so what are you hiding? Let's talk honestly and openly with each other. Great. Who will speak first? This is German territory, so the German Führer should speak first. All right. Well, let me be blunt. We, Germany, want to cede the entire Sudetenland area occupied by Czechoslovakia. As befits a person with a straightforward personality, he had no hesitation. Hitler had only one demand, it was the entire Sudetenland. Chamberlain avoided giving a definite answer, and returned to England the next day to convey Hitler's demands to France. To resolve this issue amicably, we have no choice but to have Czechoslovakia cede the Sudetenland. Does the Prime Minister agree with me? I agree. So, are you in favor of the UK holding dialogue with the Czechoslovakian government? I agree. French Prime Minister Edward Daladier agreed with Chamberlain's opinion. Even though it declared that it would help Czechoslovakia, France, which was secretly afraid of war, was confident that it would do anything to avoid war. It's a shame for the Czechoslovakians, but the safety of the French people was tens or hundreds of times more important than other countries' territory. If war breaks out anyway, Czechoslovakia will also suffer great damage. The country has been devastated, so what would you do if you won the war? That's correct. For the time being, there will be some voices of dissatisfaction among Czechoslovakians, but over time, they will understand us. Of course it will. Because peace is more precious than war. A fantastic combination where England plays the drum and France plays the django. Thanks to this, Czechoslovakia felt like coughing up blood. What is that? Does this make sense? In his phone call with Chamberlain, Czechoslovakian President Edvard Beneš felt not only absurd but also angry. Unlike Beneš, there was no change in Chamberlain's voice. I also feel sorry to deliver this news to the president. How can someone who knows that talk so calmly? Doesn't the Prime Minister know very well how important the Sudetenland is to Czechoslovakia? Beneš spoke evilly. For Czechoslovakia, the Sudetenland was like armor. Armor that protects Czechoslovakia from the teeth of the beast called Germany. The Sudetenland, which consisted mostly of highlands, was home to a large number of fortresses and defense lines that Czechoslovakia had put a lot of effort into. These were the only means of protecting Czechoslovakia in the event of war with Germany. But giving up the Sudetenland? The defense lines and fortifications that had been developed with great effort would be taken over by Germany, and Czechoslovakia would have wasted time and money. It is an added bonus that Czechoslovakia becomes completely defenseless from the German invasion. Prime Minister, let me be clear. Czechoslovakia cannot follow that decision. Chamberlain was silent for a while. Did the phone get disconnected? That wasn't it. Chamberlain quickly sighed and continued speaking in a colder voice than before. Is that really the position of the Czechoslovak government? Exactly. Then I understand. Even if your country enters a war with Germany, the British Empire will not participate. What? Beneš was so embarrassed that he forgot what he was going to say. What's the problem? This is the official position of the British Empire government. Didn't Czechoslovakia show that attitude because it also had its own beliefs? Anyway, I did everything I had to do as Prime Minister of the British Empire. If you don't have anything more to say, I'll stop now. Please make wise decisions. Even after the phone hung up, Beneš couldn't put down a receiver. Britain, the world's most powerful country, gave up Czechoslovakia. Because they are afraid of Germany. Beneš's hardships did not end here. Even during the phone call with Dalader that followed, Beneš experienced extreme despair. Prime Minister. What does that mean even to the Prime Minister? What should I do? If Britain does not participate in the war, what good will it be if France enters the war alone? No, didn't you say that the French army is the strongest in Europe? If the French army attacks Western Germany, the German army will most likely present. The military, which prided itself on being the strongest in the world, directly told me. If France fights Germany alone, there is no chance of winning. Unfortunately, reality is reality. Shouldn't we at least avoid war first? The president would also like to avoid Prague turning into a sea of fire. Just like I want to avoid seeing Paris turn into a sea of fire. Dalader's position was no different from Chamberlain's. When you say good things, give the Sudetenland to Germany. If you want to fight the war until the end, I will not stop you, but Czechoslovakia should fight Germany alone. We'll just be cheering for you. Will you go to war with the fate of your country at stake? Will we endure humiliation and maintain immediate peace? Beneš chose the latter. September 22, 1938. Munich, Germany. So, Czechoslovakia has decided to cede the Sudetenland, Mr. Führer. Chamberlain met with Hitler again a week later and presented him with a document. It was an agreement acknowledging that the Czechoslovak government would give up the Sudetenland. Britain and France guaranteed Czechoslovakia's future security in return for giving up the Sudetenland. From the perspective of Czechoslovakia, which had already lost the Sudetenland, they were given bottles and medicine, but they had to take care of this right now. With the Sudetenland gone, Czechoslovakia was like a newborn baby thrown naked into the forest. Hitler smiled broadly as he accepted the document handed to him by Chamberlain. Thank you, Prime Minister. It is all thanks to you that peace in Europe has been preserved. Haha, that's too much praise. I only played the role of a mediator. After the meeting, a banquet was held. At the banquet, a full table of various dishes was prepared for the British delegation. Now, let us all toast to peace in Europe and to Prime Minister Chamberlain, the protagonist of this meeting. Hitler, excited that the negotiations were concluded successfully, walked around the banquet hall and clinked glasses with people he met. Now, try some of this. This is an American-style fried chicken dish. We only fried boneless meat to make it easier to eat. Hitler preferred chicken with bones, but he knew that the British were uncomfortable with the act of holding and tearing the chicken with their hands, so he introduced boneless chicken. The boneless chicken was easy to eat by dipping it with a fork without using your hands. This is delicious. What is the name of this cake? This cake doesn't have a name yet. The recipe was developed not long ago. Is that so? Wow, it's so delicious. I'll probably keep thinking about it even after I return to England. Is it that much? Haha, then I will tell you the recipe so you can enjoy it in the UK too. Your wife will be happy. Ha 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 ha. Chapter 36 Night of the Long Sword October 10, 1938. German troops advanced into the Sudetenland. Germans in the Sudetenland warmly welcomed the German army and waved Hakenkreuz flags. Bells rang in every church across Germany, and people poured into the streets to shout hooray. Following the Rhineland and Austria, I took over the Sudetenland without shedding a single drop of blood, becoming an absolute presence in Germany. Germans were not the only ones who cheered the results of the Anglo-German summit. I promised the security of Czechoslovakia in exchange for the transfer of the Sudetenland, and Chamberlain returned to England with a pledge signed by me and was welcomed by the British people. Dear citizens, I have just returned to my home country from a meeting with German Führer Hitler. This pledge that I now hold in my hand contains the signature of Führer Hitler. I believe this is peace in our time. True peace has finally come in our time. The French, as much as the British, cheered that they had safely escaped the crisis of war. Only Czechoslovakians are angry that their territory was taken away without even firing a gun. Then as I resigned from the presidency, taking responsibility for the helpless loss of the Sudetenland. Emil Haha, a former lawyer, succeeded Beneš as president of Czechoslovakia. While everyone except the Czechoslovakians was in a festive mood, I quietly prepared for the next task. Heydrich, how are they doing? As His Excellency the President said, several suspicious movements have been detected among them. If you look here. The document handed over by Heydrich contained detailed information on the activities of the surveillance targets on the list. One thing is certain. As expected, the right answer was to leave it to this guy. What about the evidence? Did you secure it? We have secured it. I captured one of their subordinates and gave him a few blows, and he started pissing his pants and blowing his ass off. Did you kill him? I saved it for now. Take care of it after the cleaning is finished. All right. Since there is clear evidence, all justification is provided. In preparation for any emergency, I strengthened security at the presidential residence and summoned key executives. Preparations for deployment of military forces have also been completed. Let's begin. October 24, 1938. Berlin, Germany. Hitler, I never thought he would do it again. Even the sky is indifferent. Beck was already smoking 2 packs of cigarettes. Cigarette butts that had been roughly rubbed together were piled precariously in the ashtray, as if they would fall apart if the wind blew. Beck, who was an experienced soldier in the military, could not understand. Why are all the strategies developed by Sergeant Nabranji a huge success? Is he really receiving God's grace like his henchmen say? No. Beck shook his head vigorously. That can't be possible. There is no way such a shallow and ignorant instigator could be receiving God's grace. No problem. To calm himself down, Beck poured himself a glass of strong cognac and drank it down in one gulp. As the alcohol hit my stomach, I felt a faint pain. When he first heard the name Hitler, Beck paid little attention. Are there 1 or 2 people who call themselves a revolution and cause riots that are like child's play? After 3 days of hearing Hitler's name, Beck had completely erased it from his memory. When Mein Kampf became popular, Beck didn't even notice. Also, there are so-called prophetic books that contain useless nonsense. However, as the Great Depression broke out and Japan invaded Manchuria, Hitler's followers rapidly increased. As supporters of Hitler and the Nazis emerged even within the National Guard, Beck gradually began to become wary. Hitler was not as unremarkable a person as he thought. He was a much more insidious and dangerous person. Beck wanted to expel officers who had joined the Nazi Party from the National Guard, but was unable to do so due to opposition from President Hindenburg. Hindenburg, a war hero and living legend of the German military, had long since fallen in love with Hitler and turned into his faithful supporter. Hitler had already grown to the point where Beck could no longer do anything about it. Should I have killed him then? When Hitler tried to force the reoccupation of the Rhineland, Beck even planned a coup. Under Hitler's pressure, he made the mistake of agreeing to his argument, but from Beck's point of view, it was a sufficiently recoverable mistake. If the occupation of the Rhineland failed and pressure from the English came, Beck planned to stage a coup and oust Hitler. In any case, there was even a thought of handing Hitler over to France as a sacrifice. Just thinking about it. With the bloodless occupation of the Sudetenland, Hitler emerged as an absolute figure in Germany. The people chanted Hitler without anyone, and even the Wehrmacht was filled with Hitler's followers. Even juniors who once couldn't even make eye contact with Beck have now started to stay away from him. What a bunch of fucking opportunists. Beck got angry and hit the table with his glass. The bottom of the glass cracked, leaving a scratch on the table. It is said that the stupid Ritno guy hung a portrait of Hitler in the master bedroom of his house. He's such an asshole. What about Guderian and Keitel? These hunting dogs are busy licking Hitler's shoes. Just as Beck took the last cigarette out of his pack and was about to light it, an uninvited guest came. Sir, a guest has arrived. The maid who served Beck approached quickly and spoke. Guest? Someone? They say General Witzel Eben sent it. Witzel Eben? Yes. For what reason did Witzel Eben send someone at this late hour? The maid asked Beck, who tilted his head. Shall I send it back? No. Please take us inside. There were 2 messengers sent by Witzel Eben. Both were adult men of sturdy build, wearing trench coats and fedora hats on their heads. So, why did Witzel Eben send you to me? General Witzel Eben sent us because he had something urgent to tell you. We need you to come with us right now. Now? At this late hour? That's right. If you have something so important to say, why don't you say it over the phone? They sent us because of the risk of wiretapping. Something was strange. Beck rolled his head. Although Witzel Eben did exchange information with him through messengers, he used the telephone for urgent business. If it was really urgent, I would have definitely used the phone. But suddenly they sent a messenger saying there was a risk of wiretapping? It didn't make any sense, but it still felt like something was fishy. At least that's what Beck's intuition told him. Dismissal? I'm sorry, but I don't have time. You must go now. I understand. But wait a moment. I happen to have someone to call. Your Excellency, the danger of eavesdropping shut up. It only takes 1 minute. The moment Beck picked up the receiver, messengers said to have been sent by Witzel Eben took out pistols from their arms and aimed at Beck. The moment Beck saw the muzzle of the pistol, he froze, forgetting what he was going to do. If the old man speaks kindly, he will quietly follow. You're annoying people. Same time. Uninvited guests also came into Witzel Eben's house. In the case of Witzel Eben, he sensed something suspicious before Beck and tried to take out the Luger that had been stored in a drawer. But the Gestapo agents were faster. Cock. A bullet from the Walther PPK pistol fired by a Gestapo agent hit Witzel Eben in the shoulder. Witzel Eben fell backwards, clutching his shoulders. Don't even dream of doing anything foolish. If you mess with me one more time, I'll put a bullet between your eyes. A Gestapo agent with a knife wound on his chin said with a grin. Witzel Eben could not say anything until he took handcuffs from his arms, fastened them to his wrists, and placed a hood over his face. The trapped Witzel Eben was thrown like an object into the rock-cold truck bed. Connery's was different from the previous 2. As the leader of a fair, he noticed it long ago and attempted to escape through the back door. Run away. Chase. However, Gestapo agents were also quick to notice. As soon as Connery's ran, Gestapo agents followed closely behind him. Although Connery's was taken prisoner by the British during World War I, he eventually escaped to Germany, but even he could not overcome his age. As I passed the age of 50, my once light body suddenly became heavy and limp, and my lungs and heart became weak. It doesn't seem like I've run much, but I'm already out of breath. Damn it. Connery's, who had reached the limit of his physical strength, gave up fleeing and chose to fight. He had no intention of being caught as gently as a rabbit. I need to take at least 2 of them as companions on the way to the underworld. He aimed his Walther PP at a Gestapo agent and pulled the trigger. Ah. Hey. Girder. As the agent who had been shot in the thigh fell, another agent approached to help his fallen colleague. Connery's fired again, but this time he failed to hit. Connery's. You are surrounded. Surrender calmly. Drop your weapons. It's funny and embarrassing. Himmler's henchman. Connery's scoffed at the Gestapo's recommendation to surrender and aimed at the next target. The next target was the guy hiding behind the tree and watching the movements. Just before I pulled the trigger, a bullet flew out of the darkness and hit my hand. What the fuck? A sniper who had been waiting on a tree in advance shot Connery's in the hand. If it had been a battlefield, I would have aimed for the head, but since there was an order to capture him alive and bring him back if possible, I deliberately aimed for his hand instead of his head. The shock of being shot caused Connery's to drop his pistol. I tried to give him the gun with my left hand, but the second bullet flew out and even penetrated my left hand. A scream of pain came from his mouth. Catch. Pounce. When 3 or 4 lively Gestapo agents rushed at him at the same time, Connery's was trapped like a wild boar caught in a trap, unable to use his strength even once. This dog-like baby. I finally got it. All 3, Ludwig Beck, Erwin von Witzel Eben, and Wilhelm Connery's, have been arrested. Good. You're doing great. With the 3 most troublesome guys captured, the game was already over. I feel relieved now. Satisfied with Heydrich's report, I immediately ordered a cold Coke to be brought. Cross placed a tray of cola and a glass of ice in front of me. I can't not have a drink on this beautiful day. Cross, you too. Thank you. Perhaps because I was nervous, I was hungry. After refreshing my mouth with cola, I was eating buffalo wings when new news arrived. Mr. President? Hans Oster was also captured. Good. I am very satisfied. Hans Oster was an officer belonging to the UFR, and in the original history, He was arrested and executed for plotting to assassinate Hitler. September 1938, at the height of the Sudetenland crisis. Oster, who was a lieutenant colonel, planned a coup to oust Hitler and the Nazis and establish a new government if Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia. This incident is called the Oster Conspiracy Incident, and contrary to the conspirators' expectations, Jungf gave in to Hitler's threats and war did not break out, and Oster's plan came to nothing. Oster, who later attempted to assassinate Hitler, participated in Operation Walker on July 20, 1944, and was arrested by the Gestapo and executed before the end of the war. As can be seen from the description, in 21st century Germany, Oster is revered as a soldier with a good conscience. I also hired Oster in the past because of that. Until that guy came to get me. In the previous regression, it was Oster who shot Hess and Goebbels to death and handcuffed my wrists. On the day of my execution, there was this guy at the scene as well. Know that you will never die well. Not only Beck, Canaries, Witzel Eben, and Oster, but also Franz Halder, Hans-Jürgen von Blumenthal, Henning von Treschkopf, Erich Felgebel, Friedrich Ulbricht, and Karl Goerdeler participated in this plot or had previously participated in anti-Nazi meetings. Everyone who participated was arrested. The captured traitors were imprisoned in the basement of the Gestapo headquarters at 8 Prinz Albrechtstrasse. When the arrested traitors gave out a new list after being tortured, the newly captured traitors gave the names of other comrades. Within a day of the start of Operation Mole, the Gestapo basement was full. Since the principle was to accommodate one prisoner per cell, it was impossible to accommodate all involved in the Gestapo basement alone. As a matter of urgency, prisoners were imprisoned in nearby police stations and in the National Defense Force barracks, and sentries were set up to strictly monitor them. Himmler took pictures of imprisoned prisoners and brought them to me, faces stained with despair, fear, and emptiness. His eyes were swollen, his lips were torn and bleeding, and his arms and legs were bruised. Some had teeth marks on their forearms, as if they had attempted to harm themselves. The traitors looked like pigs waiting to be slaughtered. Himmler. Yes, Mr. President. No one will know how long I've been waiting for this moment. The morning of October 25th. Heydrich reported to me that Operation Mole had been completed. The purge, which would later be called the Second Night of the Long Swords, was successfully completed. Chapter 37 Road to 1. The evening of the day Operation Mole was completed. Goebbels announced to the public that there had been a coup attempt within the Wehrmacht. These heinous traitors, greedy for greater power, attempted to assassinate Mr. President and establish their own government. However, the conspirators' reckless attempt was discovered in advance and ended in failure. His Excellency the Führer is safe and not a single hair of his head was hurt. From now on, there will be a speech from His Excellency the President. When Goebbels gave the signal, I took the microphone and read from the manuscript I had prepared in advance. Dear citizens, today there was a coup attempt by those who were jealous of me, but we successfully suppressed it and arrested the traitors. The traitors have now been arrested and interrogated, and no one knows how many may have been involved in the plot. But my fellow citizens, don't worry. I am safe, and the government is doing its job. Although some people were injured in the process of arresting the traitors, Germany was able to escape the crisis. I think this incident was heaven's providence. I believe I was able to stay safe because there was a revelation from God telling me to survive until the end and lead this country to victory. Using this as a stepping stone, I will pledge to serve the people even more. Please rest assured and lead a peaceful daily life. That's what I want from you now. Thank you. End. Thank you both for your hard work. When the broadcasting station staff gave the OK sign, I loosened my tie and smiled. This saved me an hour. I will leave all the rest to the doctor. Don't worry, Mr. Führer. I will handle it thoroughly. Perhaps because it was a great opportunity to prove his abilities, Goebbels' eyes shone brightly. As he said, no one can follow Goebbels in this field, so you can trust him. Goebbels distributed materials he had prepared in advance and had media outlets write articles on their own. Soon, on the front pages of newspapers all over Germany, articles such as the full story of the attempted assassination of the Führer or the plot of traitors to throw Germany into an abyss. The same titles were printed in large print. The German people were greatly surprised to learn that there were forces attempting a coup. And I was angry. Who am I? Isn't he a prophet of the century, beyond the German Führer, and an unrivaled diplomatic genius who can be heard as the next Bismarck? Without exaggeration, I am already treated like a great person in Germany. But there was a coup attempt? It is natural for the people to be angry. The people, blinded by anger, completely believed the government's announcement and hurled curses and insults at the traitors who attempted a coup. I used this opportunity to completely clean up the remaining anti-Nazi forces in Germany. All minor political parties that had voiced opposition to my policies in some quarters were disbanded, like the Social Democratic Party, and their core members were placed under surveillance. Members of not only the Nazi Party but also other political parties, such as the Center Party and the National People's Party, took the lead in pledging loyalty to me. There were hundreds of people who changed their membership to the Nazi Party. All of this was possible thanks to the absolute support of the people. The public wanted thorough revenge, and I wielded public support as a weapon to swing my mace against the traitors to my heart's content. Key members such as Beck, Witzel Eben, and Canaries were all sentenced to death. Before execution, I stripped them of their military status through a military trial and demoted them all to privates. Also, the execution was not by firing squad, but by hanging while wearing a prison uniform. They pleaded that they should be executed by firing squad, and even within the military, there was an opinion that they should be executed by firing squad as a last mercy, but I flatly dismissed it. What kind of people are being executed by firing squad for tarnishing the honor of soldiers? That's ridiculous. That's right, Mr. President. They don't even deserve to be called soldiers. Himmler, who was helpful in times like these, eagerly disagreed with my opinion. Additionally, I made the scaffolding of the execution platform small so that they would die in as much pain as possible. The traitors were not killed instantly. They hit their heads on the scaffolding and died of suffocation while hanging in the air, bleeding profusely. It's not enough to hit me in the back, you have to pay for the crime of dragging me out and killing me. Cancer. It was revealed that a significant number of FBR agents participated in this coup plot. Of course they were all executed. I merged different USD and delegated full authority to Heydrich. Heydrich was happy, smiling cheerfully, unlike his usual self. The Waffen-SS 3 existing brigades, Ulsa, Das Reich, and Totenkopf, were all expanded into divisions. Walter von Renault was appointed to the vacant position of Army Chief of Staff. Even the generals who would have originally opposed Renault's appointment were silent this time. Even Gerd von Rundstedt, who had previously strongly opposed Renault's appointment as Army Chief of Staff, agreed to the appointment without comment. The previous purges probably had an effect. They must have judged that if they made a mistake, they might end up in the same situation at any time. In times like this, I'm really quick-witted. In the clear, cloudless sky, a steel falcon was flying. The guy, who was swimming around the blue pond to his heart's content, landed lightly on a straight runway a little while later. How do you feel, Mr. President? I'm satisfied. The test flight of the latest fighter Bf-109 F-type was successfully completed. According to history, this guy appeared only after the air war on the British mainland ended, but I had no intention of waiting until then, so I mobilized all my knowledge and excellent German attackers to make this guy appear early. The pilot in charge of the demonstration flight was Major Adolf Galland. As a heavy smoker, he opened the canopy and immediately took out a cigar and put it in his mouth. Hey man, are cigarettes that good? When I appeared, he quickly put a cigar in his pocket and smiled awkwardly. I don't know about anything else, but I just couldn't give up cigarettes, ha ha ha. For health reasons, try reducing it a little. You are a talent that Germany absolutely needs. So, what about the new Bf-109? Do you like it? Yes. I really like it because it is faster than the previous E-type and the weight of the aircraft is lighter. Our engineers created the right product. The Bf-109 F-type had a significant difference in appearance from the E-type due to a redesign of the entire fuselage. The most notable feature of the F-type was that the horizontal tail brace was removed, and the shape of the front fuselage and main wing was changed, resulting in a smoother overall shape. In addition, the weight was reduced and a new engine was installed, allowing it to achieve much faster speeds than the E-type. However, there are also some regrets. What is that? This is my personal opinion, but I think the E-type with the autocan installed on the wing is easier to aim. There may be many friends who prefer the autocan mounted on the main shaft, but I think it is easier to aim when mounted on the wing. Is it? Well, since each person is different, you might think that way. Unlike the E-type, which had machine guns on the wings, the F-type had machine guns mounted on the axle, so there was a difference of opinion among pilots. For example, Adolf Galland was famous for fighting in a modified aircraft equipped with an autocan on the main wing. The development of the Bf-109 T-type, which will be mounted on the aircraft carrier Graf Zeppelin, which is scheduled to be completed in 2 months, has also been completed, and a prototype of the FW-190, a new fighter aircraft that will take charge of Germany's skies along with the Bf-109, was released a week ago and underwent test flights. Production of the Ju-87, a dive bomber more commonly referred to as the Stuka, was progressing smoothly, and the HS-123 was also being produced steadily. Some people suggested that mass production of the biplane HS-123 should be stopped now that the Ju-87 was released, but I insisted and ordered that the HS-123 be produced in parallel. In terms of performance alone, it is true that HS-123 is inferior to Ju-87. However, While the Ju-87 was so specialized in dive bombing that it was somewhat unsuitable for close air support for ground forces, the HS-123, despite being an old aircraft, was excellent at close air support thanks to its high reliability and light body. In particular, the HS-123 performed very well on the Eastern Front, and because of this, the Luftwaffe leadership is said to have even seriously considered resuming mass production of the HS-123. It was cancelled because all production lines had already been scrapped. Walter Weber's strategic bomber development was also proceeding without a hitch. In actual history, Weber died in an airplane accident in 1936, which led to the halt in the development of strategic bombers and the production of only tactical bombers. However, here, thanks to Weber not dying, research on strategic bombers, which had been his long-cherished wish, gained momentum. The non-stop operation of the FW-200 heavy bomber between Berlin and New York was successful, and full-scale production began, and development of the He-177 is also underway. However, in the case of He-177, the engine had some problems, causing headaches for the researchers. Fortunately, Weber is working enthusiastically. In fact, the plan to subdivide the aircraft development department proposed by Ernst Udet, the head of aircraft procurement, was rejected long ago. Udet argued that dividing the development department would make aircraft development smoother, but I completely ignored Udet's request, knowing that the exact opposite result would come out. You've done well with the 4 departments so far. If you subdivide departments unnecessarily, the process will become overly complicated, which is likely to have a negative impact on development. So don't do anything stupid and just work hard. Reduce your drinking. Udet, who was one of the leading drinkers not only in the Luftwaffe but also in the entire Wehrmacht, committed suicide in 1941 due to depression caused by alcoholism. The He-111 bomber carrying the Air Force officers who were on their way to attend Udet's funeral crashed, killing several aces, including Werner Mulders, who was on par with Gallant. If we don't take care of it from now on, we will follow the same path as history. Despite my instructions, Udet continued to drink heavily every day. They had no choice but to mobilize the Gestapo, confiscate all the alcohol in Udet's house, and force him to see a doctor every day. They even gave him a special coach and made him go on a diet, and Udet started to change as a person day by day. Although he whined that it would be better for him to die. Mr. President. I was wrong. So please it's loud, and we'll keep doing it until you get back to what you were in your prime. Of course, if you gain weight later, it goes back to its original position. Instead, you are allowed to drink alcohol once every 2 weeks. Even so, there will be a condition attached to the 3 beers that you drink them only in front of me. Eric Belgebel, a leading communications expert in the Wehrmacht, was executed for participating in a rebellion, but his achievements could not be denied. One of Felgebel's representative achievements was the introduction of the Enigma code machine, and as Felgebel insisted, I introduced Enigma into all operations. Until it was deciphered by Alan Turing and his code-breaking team at Bletchley Park, England in 1942, Enigma boasted a very solid defense system. Before the outbreak of World War II, Poland was the first to decipher Enigma, but as Germany improved Enigma, existing deciphering methods became useless. Poland, faced with its limitations, handed over its research data to Britain, and when Alan Turing, a genius British scientist, succeeded in deciphering Enigma, the war ended in victory for the Allies. If the Allies had not been able to decipher Enigma, U-boats would have been able to run even further and unrestricted submarine warfare might have succeeded. There is even an alternative history novel called, which started from this assumption. Of course, it would be impossible to accept Britain's surrender and drive the Soviet Union beyond the Ural Mountains as in the novel, but it is clear that Germany would at least have a great advantage in the war. Even if conquering Europe is impossible, we must at least prevent defeat. Only then will we be able to escape from this tiresome wheel of regression. Just before the outbreak of war, Enigma used a method of encrypting by selecting 3 out of 5 wheels, and the improved method in 1942 was a method of selecting 4 out of 8 wheels. I introduced the latter method in 1938, and although it may be safer now, it was expected to be broken someday, so I had no choice but to focus on developing a new encryption system. The Lawrence encryption system to replace Enigma is being developed, but Lawrence was also expected to be destroyed by the Colossus computer developed by the Allies late in the war, so preparations had to be made in advance. I can't find any time to rest. Hey, Jacob. Why? Look at this. Only then did Jacob Bison turn his head to face his colleague Conrad Zeus. Zeus was looking down at Jacob, holding a tray of coffee and food. Take some rest. You've only had coffee for 2 days already. Looking around, I saw that Jacob's colleagues were all gathered together, eating bread and coffee and resting. Seeing my colleagues sipping coffee with haggard faces without any sign of vitality made me feel like I was in a nursing home. You haven't been home for a few days already? It's been a week today. Eat some first. My arm hurts. A few slices of bread, sausages, ham, cheese, jam to spread on the bread, and coffee were neatly placed on the tray. While Chiyuk was taking a bite of the sausage, Jacob was spreading jam on the bread and complaining. Now I'm even forgetting the way home. If I had known this would happen, I would have followed my father's advice and become a rabbi. Didn't you say before that you went to college because you didn't want to become a rabbi? Did I do that? I can't even remember much anymore. Despite what he said, Jacob never once regretted his career path. Because he was a human being, he had many difficult times, but he still persevered, confident that the path he had chosen to become an electronic engineer would be helpful to his country. Especially after that incident 2 weeks ago, Jacob was working harder than ever on his research. 2 weeks ago. There was a time when Führer Hitler personally visited the research lab and chatted with all the researchers, shaking their hands one by one. Officers from the National Defense Force have occasionally visited the laboratory, but this was the first visit by the Führer, so everyone was very nervous. Relax, hee. Unlike your wife, I have no intention of ripping you off. Ha 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 ha. After hearing about the researchers' difficulties and the progress of their research, Hitler gave a short speech, promising unlimited support. Jacob, who was sitting in the front row, was able to see Hitler's face up close as he spoke. In the last war, Germany lost the war because their encryption system was discovered. The same tragedy must never be repeated in history. I hope you keep in mind that the fate of Germany rests on your shoulders. Jacob's father fought in the Great War, was wounded on the Flanders front, and was discharged. Although his left foot became a crutch, he returned home with the pride of having fought as hard as he could for his country. He had no doubt that Germany would win the war. But Germany lost the war, and his sacrifice was in vain. Jacob's father, who spent his days drinking in despair, died of stomach cancer 2 years ago. Tragedies like my father's must not be repeated in the world. That's how it should be. What, starting to work already? You rested for 15 minutes. This is enough. It's not 15 minutes, it's probably 15 minutes out. Get some rest. And then you really get hooked? I'll just finish this research and rest. You can't waste even a second for your country. You were a great patriot. Am I sleeping? Wake me up in 2 hours. The morning sun was rising outside the window. For most people, this was the time to start the day, but for some, it was time to wake up. Or just keep doing what you're doing. Chapter 38 Road to 2. As I said before, Czechoslovakia, which lost the Sudetenland, was like a turtle without a shell. Although Britain and France guaranteed the safety of Czechoslovakia, isn't there a saying that the law is far and the fist is close? If war breaks out, even if the entire Czechoslovakia becomes a sea of fire, there will be nothing Young can do. Czechoslovakia's President Emil Haha, well aware of this fact, did his best not to provoke Germany. The moment anything goes wrong, Czechoslovakia will disappear from the map. Haha knew that even if Germany could turn Prague into a sea of fire, Czechoslovakia could not turn Berlin into a sea of fire, so he threw away all his pride and accepted whatever Germany demanded. However, the world was a cruel place that did not consider the circumstances of the weak at all. March 15, 1939 New Führer's residence in Berlin, Germany. Mr. President, the President of Czechoslovakia has arrived. Please take us inside. Haha, who entered the office after being guided by Ribbentrop, was already not looking good. He, who had always had a weak heart, looked pale as if he was daunted by the grandeur of the new presidential residence designed by Speer. The way his eyes roll back and forth is like looking at a frightened abandoned dog. What a pitiful nobleman. Welcome, President. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for the invitation, President. When I held out my hand, Haha hesitated, but took the hand I held out and shook it. Light and weak hands. It was a small, fragile hand that looked like it would break if the slightest force was applied. Haha let go and took out a handkerchief from his jacket pocket and wiped the sweat from his forehead. You seem quite nervous. Well, even if you are like me, you can't help but be nervous. Especially in a situation like now where the fate of the country is at stake. As the head of a country, he came with dozens of people when he came to Germany, but when he entered the new presidential residence, only Haha was allowed to enter. Although this was a clear diplomatic discourtesy, Haha, who had already been at odds with Germany, was unable to make any protest and had no choice but to enter the official residence alone. Haha, who was thrown into enemy territory alone without a single attendant, sweated like rain as if he sensed the coming future. Anyone who sees it will think that summer has already arrived. Minister Ribbentrop, please leave for a moment. I have something to discuss privately with the president. All right. After Ribbentrop left, there were only 2 people left in the office, Haha and me. Haha barely opened his mouth with a paler face than before. President, may I ask why you invited me all the way to this faraway place? Let me be blunt, Mr. President. Please listen carefully. I deliberately ignored Haha's question and got straight to the point. President, let me be honest with you. I intend to split Czechoslovakia into the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Yes. Haha blinked as if he didn't understand what I was saying. After a while, astonishment bloomed on his face. What is that? I also feel very sorry to say this, but it is unavoidable for the future of Greater Germany. Like I said, it's bullshit. However, even if it is the same bullshit, the words spoken by the unemployed person in the corner and the words spoken by the German Führer have different weights. Yesterday I met with Prime Minister Joseph Tiso and approved the independence of Slovakia. Even though you are not in favor of Slovakian independence, it will happen soon. Because I will make it happen. While I was talking, Haha sat blankly and just looked at my mouth. Like a corpse whose soul has left and only an empty shell remains. Don't be too sad. Until 1918, Czechoslovakia did not exist on maps. The only difference is that this time it will be part of the Third Reich rather than the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The new name for the Czech Republic, which has become part of the Third Reich, is the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. You will remain president of the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. Even though it is a protectorate, there will be no harm to your presidency. I guarantee it. For a moment. The lives of the Czech people will also remain the same. Except that German must be taught in schools. Soldiers will not have to continue their difficult and arduous military life. Only those who are willing to serve in the German army will remain in the army, and the rest of the young people will be sent back to the home and hometown I miss. We will also leave Czech civil servants and police officers alone. The civil servants we dispatched will be their superiors, but we will try to get along with them. Czechs will be protected by German law and will be subject to the same punishment as German law. Of course, the same goes for Germans, so you don't have to worry about discrimination. We have also prepared a new flag in advance. How is it? Isn't it okay? I made it myself. I showed Haha the white, red and blue tricolor flag. This was to become the flag of the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. If you have any questions, ask. I will answer sincerely. Wow, do you really think our people will just sit by and watch this? Haha's voice was thinner than the flapping of a butterfly's wings, so you couldn't hear it unless you listened closely. He didn't avoid my gaze, but his hands were already shaking. I simply cannot accept such a humiliating treaty that can't be possible. Haha, who was speechless, stared at me with bewildered eyes. I looked into the eyes of the aging president. It looked exactly like the wounded soldier I saw on the Western Front waiting for the moment of death. A state where one can breathe, but cannot be said to be alive. That was the state of Czechoslovakia. President, I know you well. You have worked hard for your country all your life. I know that you love your country, Czechoslovakia, more than anything else. You also don't want to see Prague burn into a sea of fire. No way. I am also a person who loves culture and history, so I would like to avoid Prague, with its long history, being reduced to nothing more than a heap of ashes. Shouldn't future generations also be able to appreciate the beautiful night view of Prague? Of course, it's up to you. Haha just passed out. As soon as poor Haha woke up after receiving first aid, he had to face the heavy reality that faced him. Haha, who had hoped this was all a nightmare, realized that where he was real and almost fainted again. When he finally came to his senses, I offered him a glass of water. He suspected that the water I gave him might be poisonous, so he did not drink it. I had no choice but to drink the water in the glass, fill a new glass with water, and hand it to him. Only then did he finally take the glass and drink it, even though he felt uncomfortable. It's very simple, President. All you have to do is sign this document. Then everything will be over. I handed him the document. It was a document expressing support for the unification of Germany and the Czech Republic. Do not worry. Because I am a person who strictly keeps promises. The Czech people will live forever in the arms of Greater Germany, and you will remain the keeper of peace. Although those who hate you will accuse you of being a traitor, history will later prove your innocence. Haha was silent for a long time after picking up the document. Finally, he picked up the pen with trembling hands and put it on the document. God, forgive me. After finishing signing, Haha fainted again. The day the Czech Republic disappeared into history. Hungarian troops crossed the border into Slovakia. There was minor fighting between the Hungarian and Slovakian forces, but it quickly calmed down. According to the treaty signed with Germany by Joseph Tiso, the first president of the First Republic of Slovakia, Slovakia ceded part of its territory to Hungary. Hungary, which had been pursuing rearmament by secretly burying itself in Germany, which had attracted a lot of international aggression with its declaration of rearmament and reoccupation of the Rhineland, succeeded in recovering some of the territory it had lost through the Treaty of Trianon. March 20. Horthy Miklos, regent of the Kingdom of Hungary, officially declared the rearmament of Hungary. Romania and Yugoslavia immediately issued statements of condemnation, but Nicholas I paid no attention. A military alliance was signed with Germany the day after the rearmament declaration. In return for our alliance, we were able to import Hungarian coal and oil at low prices. Although oil was being imported from Romania, there was a problem that a direct route from Ploiesti, where the oil fields were located, to Germany had not yet been developed. Oil was unloaded in Greece via sea route and then brought back to Germany via land route, but this took too long. Although the amount of oil that can be imported from Hungary is less than that of Romania, it is not a bad choice as the price is cheaper and import time will be saved. Yugoslavia and Romania already did not have the strength to wage war against Hungary, but to make matters worse, when Germany followed suit, they only criticized Hungary with their mouths and retreated. Hungary will take care of Hungary's affairs, so for now we should focus on our own. Among the tanks owned by the Czechoslovak army, the disposal of the A4, LT-34, and LT-35 light tanks was decided upon at a meeting with Guderian. As the A4 and LT-34 were too outdated for Wehrmacht use, it was decided to transfer and sell all but a few units as souvenirs of the Czech annexation to Slovakia and Romania. LT-35 was renamed 35T and deployed to the Army's 1st Armored Division. It is much better than the tank at level tank number 1 and the number 2 tank, which is equipped with a 20mm cannon instead of a tank gun, but its performance is not excellent enough to continue production, so the production line was decided to be discarded. Unlike the previous ones, the LT-38 handled well. It was given a new name, 38T, and deployed to the Wehrmacht and the Waffen-SS. Although it was weaker than the 4th Panzer, it had better performance than the 35T, so a decision was made to continue production for the time being. With the deployment of the 35T and 38T, all tanks that had remained in service until now were retired except for training purposes. And, take a look, General. These are things I have planned, and I would like to hear the General's evaluation. This. An exclamation immediately came out of Guderian's mouth as he calmly examined the blueprint I gave him. It's pretty good. Like a fool who only knew about tanks, Guderian immediately grasped the true value of the blueprints I gave him. I planned to use the 38T to build assault guns, tank destroyers, self-propelled guns, and APCs, armored personnel carriers. Of course, these were not my creations, they all existed in history. Of these, the first one to be made was definitely the assault cannon. 60mm 60-degree sloped armor on the front of the vehicle body will have an effect comparable to 120mm vertical armor. It's a number that can repel attacks from all existing tanks. The 38T tank destroyer Hetzer is a luxury weapon that appeared in 1944 at the end of World War II and was used until Germany was defeated. It weighs 16 tons, which is 9 tons lighter than the Panzer IV, but its protection is better than that of the Tiger, although it is limited to the front. Because the price was reasonable and production was easy, Czechoslovakia continued to produce the Hatcher using the factories that remained in the country after the war, and Switzerland also imported the Hatcher and operated it under the name G13 anti-tank self-propelled gun until 1972. Even Israel paid attention to the performance of the Hatcher and considered introducing it. It was eventually cancelled. If development begins now, Hatcher will be able to be put into service by 1940 at the latest. Pak 38 is in mass production, and Pak 40 is scheduled to be released before the leaves fall. By the time the Hatcher comes out, it will have gone into mass production, so there should be no problem mounting the main gun. If the quantity is insufficient, you can add at least Pak 38. The performance of the Pak 38 was decent until it encountered the T-34 and KV-1 on the Eastern Front. I lay in bed with a happy heart today, imagining how I would show the fear of the German tank corps to the enemies who were using tanks like tankettes. I hope tomorrow comes quickly. Chapter 39 Road to 3, Hitler, come on. I didn't believe him after all. Damn it. When Germany annexed the Czech Republic, Britain and France were put on alert. The security guarantee for Czechoslovakia that Hitler had promised at the Anglo-German summit was rendered meaningless, and the pledge signed by the British and German leaders was reduced to nothing more than a piece of paper. Czechoslovakia no longer exists. What was once the Czech Republic is now a province of Germany under the new title of Bohemia-Moravia, and Slovakia survives but is a German puppet state. Britain, which had been hit hard by the annexation of the Czech Republic, was furious at Germany's betrayal. The power of the British Union of Fascists, BUF, which had been attracting supporters by claiming friendship with Germany, was weakened, and public opinion that Germany should be punished rapidly rose. I predict that war with Germany will soon be inevitable. We need to prepare now. That is correct. We need to increase our military budget and expand our divisions. Then the budget. Is the budget important now? You never know when war will break out. In fact, Chamberlain did not completely trust Hitler and increased his military forces right after the Anglo-German summit ended. There was a sarcasm calling for more money to be invested in welfare, but as Germany's mask was removed through the annexation of the Czech Republic, voices opposing the increase in military spending were heard. To make matters worse, on April 1, as the Spanish Civil War, which had lasted 3 years, ended with the victory of the German-backed nationalist faction, the sense of crisis in England grew even more. French public opinion, which had been extremely negative about the war due to memories of World War I, also changed to a hardline view of the need to prepare for war with Germany. In May, Germany began claiming sovereignty over the Danzig corridor, which was occupied by Poland. The shadow of war was falling over Europe much sooner than everyone thought. As expected, Poland flatly rejected my request to return Danzig. I offered Poland the right to freely use the railways of the Danzig corridor for 30 years and support the modernization of the Polish army if they gave up Danzig, but our proud Polish friends refused even this. The commander-in-chief of the Polish army, Edward Radziwiłł, reportedly scoffed at my suggestion and said, "If I pass Königsberg, I will consider passing Danzig." That's a bold statement. It was a common idea among all Germans that the former Eastern territories, including Danzig, which had been taken over by Poland due to defeat in World War I, should be recovered. The Junkers and the Nazis, as well as the Social Democrats and the Communists, all agreed on this issue. I, who had been preparing for war with Poland even before the annexation of the Czech Republic, pretended to continue negotiations with Poland and later ordered the establishment of a plan to invade Poland. As soon as I received my order, Keitel, Brauchitsch, and Renault stayed up all night concentrating on drawing up an invasion plan, and a month later, they prepared a thick report and presented it to me. Operation White. It was the name of the operation for the invasion plan of Poland. The detailed plan of Operation White was not much different from what I knew in history. Except that since the non-aggression pact has not yet been concluded, plans are being made to occupy eastern Poland. How many days do you think it will take to completely bring Poland into submission? If all goes according to plan, it will take a month and a half, or 2 months if the Polish army is stronger than we think. Keitel answered. Since I did not want to run out of ammunition at the end of the invasion like the actual German army and become heartbroken, I ordered the military to store up as much ammunition as possible. Thanks to Todt and Speer's efforts, ammunition production is going smoothly, but you never know. You should always get into the habit of being prepared. The problem is Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. Keitel frowned. Brauchitsch and Renault, who were confident that Poland would not be a problem, also hardened when young Pso was mentioned. What the German military was most concerned about right before the invasion of Poland was whether or not the 3 Anglophone countries would intervene. Italy was not included in anyone's consideration. If Britain and France attacked Western Germany while Germany was attacking Poland, the German army had no way to stop it. Even if the possibility of intervention was somewhat low because the Soviet Union had a bad relationship with Poland, it was obvious that Britain and France would unconditionally intervene. In reality, it was like that. It is said that when the ultimatum from Britain and France was delivered, not only the German generals but even Hitler cried out. To that extent, Jungf's intervention was a problem that Germany had to avoid at all costs. But the problem is that just because something needs to be avoided doesn't mean it can be avoided. Having already lost face over the Czechoslovakia issue, if we retreat from the Polish issue, our pride will of course plummet to the bottom, and the worst situation that could happen is that all the countries that have been allied with the British will turn their backs and join hands with Germany. Because of this, Jungf came out very firmly on the Polish issue. So much so that one doubts whether it is the young man who showed such indecisiveness in the Sudetenland last time. Jungf's intervention is unavoidable. But the Soviet Union is a different story. I can't do anything about England and France. Instead, the Soviet Union won't have to worry. What do you mean, there's no need to worry about the Soviet Union? Brauchitsch tilted his head. Keitel and Renault also blinked, not understanding what I meant. We'll see. Although it was a little later than actual history, the Soviet Union was also put on alert when Germany began demanding Danzig from Poland. The relationship between Germany, an anti-communist country, and a communist country cannot mix like water and oil. Although the Soviet Union's relationship with Poland was extremely poor, Stalin was very concerned that Germany might invade the Soviet Union through Poland. Even though it did not like Poland, the Soviet Union believed that Poland's security was important to prevent the invasion of Germany, which was much more threatening than Poland, and attempted to contact Jungf. The 4 countries, Britain, France, Poland, and the Soviet Union, proposed to form an alliance against Germany. England and Poland, who were in a more desperate position than anyone else, showed a completely different situation than the Soviet Union expected. The Soviet Union proposed an alliance? Those communists? It's something to see if you live for a very long time. Although not as bad as Germany, The UK and France are also countries that reject communism. The two colonial empires that colonized about half of the world and the Soviet Union, which called for revolution and called for the eradication of imperialism and capitalism, perceived each other as enemies until the rise of Germany, and are not much different now. Stalin also did not like the idea of joining hands with the imperialists, but he judged that the Soviet Union's chances of winning a war against Germany alone were low, so he had no choice but to reach out to Young first. No matter how money-obsessed the imperialists are, they know that they must join forces in the face of the common enemy, Germany. If the British Empire helps Poland from the west and the Soviet Union pressures Poland from the east, even Hitler will not be able to run rampant. I should have done that. Comrade Secretary General, a reply has arrived from England. Is it now? Stalin was so dumbfounded that he was speechless. I can't believe I received a reply only 6 weeks after I proposed forming a military alliance against Germany. Isn't it too late at least? Even the reply was shocking. I don't know about a military alliance, but let's hold a preliminary meeting and discuss it. Stalin gritted his teeth without realizing it. Carefree guys. We don't know when war will break out, so why don't we just take it easy and have a meeting? Are all imperialists like this? But Comrade Secretary General, since you have received a reply, I don't think you need to look at it so negatively. Václav Molotov, who became People's Commissar for Foreign Affairs in place of Maxim Litvinov, who was demoted as Soviet ambassador to the United States, said. He continued speaking carefully, paying special attention to his choice of words so as not to offend Stalin. Okay. We need to understand those arrogant bastards. Is there anything you can do? That is a reasonable statement, Comrade Secretary General. Imperialists are people who are blinded by greed and have no sense of decency. Stalin, who was looking with half disgust at the Molotov that was rattling hard to please him, shook his head and got up from his desk. I was so stressed out that I felt like I needed to relieve my mood with some vodka and cognac. Tell England. Instead, we will decide the meeting place. All right. Stalin chose his country's capital, Moscow, as the location for the summit meeting of the three Anglo-Soviet powers. Surprisingly, Britain and France also agreed that the meeting location should be Moscow. Soviet Union was a little relieved that Young was not thinking at all, but relief soon turned into anger. What, these guys? Are you kidding me? This is so. The Anglo-French negotiation team arrived in the Soviet Union a month after accepting the Soviet Union's proposal to hold talks in Moscow, but instead of going straight to Moscow, they stayed in Leningrad all day. Oh, this is the famous Winter Palace. It's as grand as I heard. I've only seen it in pictures, but it's truly spectacular. After spending a full day sightseeing, the British negotiating team arrived in Moscow only on August 12. Stalin was furious, but he swallowed his anger until the end. He appointed his close friend, Marshal Kliment Voroshilov, who served as the Minister of Defense of the Soviet Union, as the head of the negotiation team, and other prominent figures, including Soviet Army Chief of Staff Marshal Boris Shaposhnikov, as negotiating team members. As such, the Soviet Union was taking this negotiation very seriously. However, once again, Britain and France shattered the Soviet Union's expectations. If war with Germany breaks out, the Soviet Union can deploy 120 army divisions, 5,000 artillery pieces, 9,000 tanks, and 5,000 aircraft. How many troops can Britain and France deploy? The head of the French negotiator, Army General Joseph Doumaine, responded to the words of Voroshilov, head of the Soviet negotiator. France can deploy 110 divisions and 4,000 tanks. Although smaller than the Red Army, this is also a significant number. In particular, the French army prides itself on being the world's strongest army, so if qualitative aspects are taken into consideration, it will be able to compete with the German army. Then what about England? That is. Unlike Doumaine, who answered confidently, Rear Admiral Reginald Drax, head of the British negotiation team, trailed off as if something was pricking him. The British Empire can send 16 divisions. Isn't the interpretation wrong? Voroshilov was so embarrassed that he even stuttered. When he first heard Drax speak, he thought the interpretation was wrong. However, he interpreted what the interpreter Drax said without making a single mistake and told it to Voroshilov. Since it's England, I thought there would be about 160 divisions, but there are only 16 divisions? Does 16 divisions make sense based on common sense? The British Empire, the world's most powerful country? During the Great War, Britain dispatched 80 divisions to Europe. But instead of increasing the number, it is actually decreasing. Does this make sense? No, the British Empire can only send 16 divisions? Are you trying to joke with me? Marshal Voroshilov, this is embarrassing, but it is no joke. Indeed, the British Empire can only send 16 divisions. As the economy worsened due to the Great Depression, military spending was drastically cut, with the Army taking the biggest hit. It would be a different story for the Navy, but the Army is still in the midst of reorganization, so only 16 were squeezed out. There are only 4 divisions that can be deployed right away. It was becoming increasingly more difficult. It is absurd to say that there are 16 divisions, but only 4 of them can be deployed right away. Voroshilov and even the interpreter were left speechless by the absurd words of the British negotiating team. Voroshilov made eye contact with Shaposhnikov, who was sitting next to him. Voroshilov's eyes seemed to say, "Should I continue with this? Still, it's us who are disappointed, so let's continue for now." "Is that so? Oh, there's one thing I forgot to mention." "Please tell me, General Gumeng." Voroshilov, who was calming his mind while drinking tea, was dealt another heavy blow. France has no plans to send its troops beyond the Maginot Line. Please keep this in mind. France's statement that it would only play within the Maginot Line built on the border with Germany was essentially the same as saying that it had no intention of attacking the German mainland. In other words, they were going to sit back and just defend themselves, so the Soviet Union should fight Germany first. Chapter 40 Road to 4. The indifferent attitude of Britain and France was also a problem, but Poland had even more no answer. Let those damn communists into our sacred territory? Tell him to fuck off. It's better to live like a pig and a dog. Poland, which had stronger anti-Soviet sentiments than Britain, France, or even Germany, resolutely rejected the military alliance proposed by the Soviet Union. What kind of country is Poland? Wasn't this a country that had been under Russian rule for hundreds of years and only achieved independence about 20 years ago? In particular, the Soviet Union even invaded Poland, which had just become independent, in order to turn it into a puppet state again. However, the war ended with Poland's victory, and the defeated Soviet Union had to experience the humiliation of losing Belarus and western Ukraine to Poland. Because of this, the feelings between the two countries were very bad towards each other. Stalin also hated Poland, which had inflicted a humiliating defeat on him in the past, but he was also willing to sign an alliance with Poland to stop Germany. I need to put out the fire urgently right now. But Poland had no intention of doing so. If we join hands with Germany, Poland will lose its freedom. But if she joins the Soviet Union, she will lose her soul. These were the words of Edward Radziwiłł, commander-in-chief of the Polish army and de facto ruler of Poland. The thoughts of the Polish people were no different from Radziwiłł. You started a war just a few years ago and now you're brazenly forming an alliance? That's ridiculous. The Soviet Union asked Poland to at least allow passage through its territory, but Poland refused even this. Who knows what they will do if they come in under the pretext of attacking Germany? What kind of idiots do they think we are? Even though the British could not stop Poland, they got on the nerves of the Soviet Union by subtly siding with Poland. In fact, the reason why Juncker showed a lukewarm attitude toward negotiations with the Soviet Union was because of Poland. There were concerns that Poland, which rebelled against an alliance with the Soviet Union, might end up joining Germany, but they were also overconfident in Poland's capabilities. Even though its landmass is much smaller than that of the Soviet Union, isn't it a powerhouse competing for first or second place in Eastern Europe in terms of military power? Even in the Soviet-Polish War, even though they were pushed back to the capital city of Warsaw, they eventually won and even took territory from the Soviet Union, which was several times larger in weight. Even without the Soviet Union's help, Poland will be able to sufficiently restrain Germany. Anyway. Lastly, by following England's lead to Italy and supporting Poland, the Soviet Union went from being so excited to being humiliated. It was natural for Stalin to be extremely angry. Damn imperialists. As expected, they were just playing with us and had no intention of talking to us in the first place. I apologize, Comrade Secretary General. Molotov trembled, repeatedly lowering his head as if it were his fault. Stalin looked down at Molotov with half pity and half disdain and continued speaking. It would be better for us to fight Germany on our own than to join hands with those pigs. Isn't that right? You are right. There are people in this country who passionately follow communist values. Lavrentiy Beria, Stalin's confidant and head of the Soviet secret police organization NKVD, zealously disagreed with Stalin's words and argued that Britain and France should one day take proper action. Stalin's other henchmen, Voroshilov and Nikita Khrushchev, looked at Beria with disapproving eyes, but pretended to agree with Beria's words in front of Stalin. Because it's important now not to get on Stalin's nerves. However, the country that approached Stalin first, who was distracted by the failure of negotiations with the West, was none other than Germany. August 2, 1939. New Führer's residence in Berlin, Germany. Does the foreign minister think it makes sense to negotiate with communists? Goering sarcastically sneered at Ribbentrop, who suggested meeting and negotiating with Stalin. Himmler and Goebbels were also dumbfounded, as if they had heard something absurd. Bringing Russia into the alliance has long been a good choice. Prussia did the same during the Napoleonic Wars, and Bismarck also reached out to Russia to isolate France. However, it is a different story in today's Russia, where the Tsar has disappeared and the Communist Party has taken power. It has fought fiercely with the Nazi Party for a long time, and the first target it destroyed after the Nazi Party came to power was the Communist Party. Will the Soviet Union really listen to Germany's proposal? You'll be lucky if you don't spit. However, Ribbentrop responded without even raising an eyebrow, as if he had anticipated Göring's sarcasm. Why not? Now that negotiations with Poland have proven impossible, is there anything else we can negotiate with other than the Soviet Union? Ribbentrop, who was ridiculed by his rivals in the Nazi Party and the military as a liquor dealer, was undervalued by historians due to his narcissism and bravado. I also partly agree with the historians' comments. He is quick-witted, has excellent workability, and has great courage, but he needs to be able to act appropriately in front of others, but he has no intention of doing so. If he could just hide his bravado and pride, his enemies would be cut in half. However, Ribbentrop had one ability that others did not have. The ability to discover a glimmer of possibility even in what others consider impossible. Negotiations with the Soviet Union, which everyone thought were impossible, also came from Ribbentrop's head. And we made it happen again. Looking at things like this, Ribbentrop is by no means a bad guy. Rather, it's the opposite. I agree with Ribbentrop. As expected of the president. Yes. Göring, who naturally thought I would support him, was embarrassed and stuttered. Why but? As if I said something I couldn't do. Oh, no, Mr. President, will the communists at least listen to what we say? Of course, it would have been so in the past. But not now. You heard and know what the negotiations with Young turned out, right? As in history, the negotiations between the Soviet Union and the British Empire ended in vain without any conclusion being reached. Stalin was angry because he thought that Young, who had taken a sloppy approach to the negotiations, had insulted him, and it was Nazi Germany who took advantage of the gap. Our biggest enemies now are England, France, and Poland. In order to fight the enemies in front of us, we must join forces with the communists. The Russians are also gritting their teeth in Poland, so they won't ignore what we say. You wouldn't say nonsense about dealing with these three countries at the same time just because you don't want to negotiate with communists, right? Is that possible? I just think the chances are better. Leaving behind Göring, who was making lame excuses, I turned my attention to Ribbentrop. Ribbentrop? Yes. Tell this to the Soviet Union. We, Germany, are willing to negotiate with you. I will leave this matter entirely up to your judgment. Thank you, Mr. President. The Soviet Union immediately accepted Ribbentrop's proposal. August 19. The two countries signed a trade agreement and agreed to hold a summit in Moscow. August 23. Ribbentrop, who had been given full authority by Hitler, led the German delegation and flew to Moscow. The Moscow airport was decorated with Hakenkreuz flags, which were thought to be rare in the Soviet Union, and Molotov personally came out to greet Ribbentrop. Nice to meet you, Minister Ribbentrop. Nice to meet you too, Minister Molotov. The two had lunch at the airport and then headed to the Kremlin. Upon entering the Kremlin, Stalin walked out with a smile on his face and welcomed the delegation. The Soviet military band placed on the left and right played the Nazi Party's official party song, Horst Wessel Song. This was also a song that I thought would not be heard in the Soviet Union. Welcome, Minister Ribbentrop. I am Stalin. It is a great honor to meet Your Excellency the Secretary in person. We've been swearing at each other a lot until now. Isn't that right? The face was smiling, but there was a bone in the words. However, Ribbentrop is also an expert in this area. He also laughed and responded to Stalin's joke, which was not a joke. Rest assured. Not from now on. Ha 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 ha. Stalin seemed to like Ribbentrop's words and laughed heartily. Then he lightly tapped his shoulder and guided him to the conference room. Indeed, he seems like someone that Hitler's Führer trusts. Now, let's go inside. As soon as the welcoming ceremony was over, the two countries began negotiations. Stalin himself was present at the negotiations. Let me ask you one thing first. How much is Germany willing to give up for our Soviet Union? I think I can answer that question if you tell me what Your Excellency wants, Secretary General. Well, that's right. I'll be honest. We want the Baltic states and all of Finland, as well as eastern Poland and Bessarabia, Moldova. Ribbentrop, who heard Stalin's words, had to strain his face to keep from showing his surprise. It was not that I was surprised that Stalin's demands were more numerous than expected, but that I was surprised by Hitler's judgment that Stalin would make the following demands. Stalin will definitely demand eastern Poland, Bessarabia, the Baltic states and Finland. Maybe even the Balkan Peninsula. You must agree to all of Stalin's demands except for the Balkan Peninsula. If you request anything more than that, please let me know. The Führer's prediction was correct. Ribbentrop pretended to ponder for a moment. He judged that if he hastily agreed to the request, he might be asked for something additional. I understand. Then let's do it. Who? Instead, we in Germany also have conditions. Please speak. I want the Soviet Union to provide supplies that Germany needs. Here is a list of items that Germany wants from the Soviet Union. Ribbentrop received the document from his secretary Richard Schultz and handed it to Stalin. The document contained a list of various goods ranging from food such as wheat and barley to minerals such as iron ore, nickel, copper, and tungsten, oil, and lumber. Okay. I accept it. Stalin also accepted Germany's demands. Negotiations lasted from afternoon to late evening. Throughout the negotiations, the atmosphere in the meeting room was friendly, and jokes were exchanged occasionally. August 24th. Negotiations have ended. Compared to the previous negotiations with Young, the speed was surprisingly fast. Smile, smile. Ha 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 ha. Negotiations were concluded and Germany and the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression pact. After the signature was completed, Stalin smiled broadly and shook Ribbentrop's hand. Starting today, I am also anti-communist. I will also join the Communist Party. Now, let's have a drink for the eternal friendship between our two countries. Even though Stalin had not yet tasted alcohol, he continued to laugh as if he were already drunk. Stalin's associates, including Voroshilov, Shaposhnikov, and Molotov, stood side by side with the German delegation, smiling awkwardly. For peace. 4. Glasses filled with champagne clinked in the air, and a military band played music to match them. Please tell this to Führer Hitler. I will keep this agreement until the end. Do not worry. I will tell you well. Look there. Am I right? After receiving the report that the non-aggression pact had been successfully concluded at my villa in Berchtesgaden, I spoke in a triumphant manner. Göring, you were wrong this time. Do you admit it? Yes. Göring concentrated on cutting the tiramisu into pieces with a sullen expression on his face. He must have been quite displeased with the unexpected results of Ribbentrop, whom he regarded as a subordinate. Even though he has lost weight, he is still narrow-minded. Ribbentrop, I know he has an eccentric personality, but let's still be friendly. Aren't you the one who will rule this country after me in the future? It's because such a person is so narrow-minded. I will try. Goebbels, you too. I know you hate Ribbentrop, but shouldn't she recognize his abilities? But Mr. President, this incident seems to be more of a coincidence than a result of his ability. Even Goebbels, who usually obeyed my words absolutely, did not want to acknowledge my words this time. At least Göring did not remain hostile until his death, having several conversations with Ribbentrop during the Nuremberg war crimes trials, but Goebbels, who committed suicide after Hitler, was not in the same situation. Goebbels disliked Ribbentrop to the point that he avoided even meeting him on business matters. You are here, Mr. President. Ah, Himmler. Welcome. Unlike Göring and Goebbels, who were in civilian clothes, Himmler was still wearing his black SS uniform. I have news to deliver to His Excellency the President. Okay? I guess this is important news? It's not particularly important news, but I still think you should know. It's not important, but I need to know? What kind of news is that? This is news about a novelist named Remarque.